It must be 2:08 because here we are streaming again on a Saturday. So I've changed up my look again, a little bit for the better, I hope. And I thought that this would be a good approach for today's stream. I get to sit and kind of give my legs a rest for once. Usually these streams I stand. And I found a way to make the background blend in with the video that's happening. So if you've seen this video in the background, that's because I used it 2 weeks ago. And now we are going to see how it goes with this one. So, hey guys. I am going to move this where I can see it more easily. Oh my goodness, it's so big. That's what she said. I gotta move this. This is not gonna work. Let's put this here. Put this right here. Look at all these people chiming in. Hello, everyone. So fast. Like that, 49 people are in the live stream. It's like you were waiting. So I wanted to talk today about success versus failure. I looked at all of our live streams. I believe this one is like 130. And so we've covered a lot of topics. And, I try not to repeat the same topic twice, but as we grow, it's possible we're going to reopen old topics, just like the question and answer period that we do after the live stream. A lot of times I answer questions that have been asked a lot of times, and I just keep answering them to keep helping you, because maybe you missed the answer previously, or maybe you're brand new to the hobby, and you're still trying to figure things out and didn't know there was a stream that talked about this in the past. One person wrote me yesterday and said, I've been watching your videos and your streams are so long, it will take me a year to get caught up. He's probably right. So, let's start off with, success versus failure, because who's to judge that? And that's my question. Are you judging yourself too harshly? Are you comparing yourself, your skill set, to someone that's had 20 years experience? It's one thing to say, I would love my tank to look like that one, that may be, tank of the month quality. And that's a great goal to aim for. I think I did that too. I believe that I looked at stuff and I said, I really want to have that kind of tank one day. But it didn't diminish the tank I had now. It didn't make me feel like mine wasn't good enough. It was mine. I was growing it. And over time it gets better. And you guys come to this channel week after week, and technically I've never had a tank of the month. The 2 times that I was selected for it, I declined or postponed it. And I said it wasn't quite ready there. And then I missed the opportunity. My fault. But that's okay. I still get to enjoy my tank every single day. It is my tank. I love it. And I love my babies. So they're over there right now enjoying themselves. You're seeing them from above here from film 2 weeks ago. And you can see the skunk clownfish, which, by the way, some people ask me, do you still have all 11? I absolutely still have all 11. None are missing. So that's pretty cool. And it's been going on like this for, I think I've had them 4 years now. So that's a pretty good run so far. Let's see. And then I need to kind of, well, let me stay on topic. I don't want to get distracted. So if you're not happy with your tank right now, what is it that makes you unhappy? What makes you feel like it's not successful, or maybe even it's a failure? What's bothering you and why? If the tank is new, if it's young, it's going to go through the ugly phase. That's very normal in the first few months. And, we just have to live through it. It's just like if you bought a brand new house and then, all around the house it's dirt because they brought in all these trucks and they just destroyed the surface. And then they finally bring in a guy who will then spray down some kind of grass seed. It almost looks like he's painting the ground green, and it looks brown and green. And then, in a few weeks you start to see grass budding out, and then, in X amount of months, it starts to look like a nice yard, and you're mowing it and you're edging it and you're making it nicer and nicer. But there was some ugly months. That's what reef tanks do too. There is nothing, it's very, very hard for anyone to set up a reef tank and have it just fall into glory and stay that way nonstop. It's not normal. And while we do have the willpower to force things our way to some degree, Mother Nature takes over at some point and says, nope, you can't quite push me that hard. And so we instead have to acknowledge that sometimes we're just going to have to wait. So, I did a live stream all about patience. If you want to, you could watch that one and kind of go over it. And that way you'd be able to kind of deal with that part of your psyche that tells you, I want it now. Because we all like things now. I mean, I dream of things I want to buy. I think about the things I want to own. I think about how my life will be better. And, but I try to hold off. I'm actually pretty patient overall. I can be impatient. I can. It's a flaw. But I tend to act like I have tons of patience. I'm willing to wait for things. I'm never in a massive hurry for anything. So if your tank is past the ugly phase, but you're still not happy, what is it you're not happy about? Is it that you spent a lot of money on a single coral, like some little frag that is high dollar, and it's not doing well, but all the rest of your tank is doing well? Are you focused on the one coral that's a pain in the butt that cost you so much money? Maybe you should just let it be. One of the things I say often, it's because I do it, is I keep my hand out of the tank. And I've noticed more and more people posting in Club Milos Reef saying, when I stopped putting my hand in the tank started to do better. And I believe that's a thing. I think the more we tinker with the innards of the tank, the more we reach in and do stuff, the more we disturb the entire ecosystem one way or another, through pollutants, through chemicals in the water from things that come off your skin, the tools you're putting in that may have things on them that could affect your tank. Even if it's something as simple as cooking oil that you use to protect the tongs from rusting, and you wiped it down, but there's still some trace of it, and it gets in the water and affects the skimmer. Skimmer isn't working as well. Things are changing. Corals kind of think, what the heck's happened to the water? So, there's these temporary glitches. And then the bigger your tank is, the more forgiving. And the smaller your tank, the more picky it is, the more things can go wrong quickly. And so if you have a small little nano and you love it and it's not doing what you want, that one, you have to stay really on top of it. You have to literally watch those water parameters. And when I tell you to test weekly, I actually mean it. If you'll do that, you'll avoid a lot of problems. And you can lean into the success column instead of into the failure column. Now, one thing that will happen, and it happens to all of us, is occasionally you'll lose a coral. It'll just die. And if that happens, once there's no life left, the smartest thing you can do is remove that coral from the tank. If you have a bunch of cleanup crew in your tank and some of them have died, you have some empty shells lying on the bottom of the sand, remove them from the tank. Just remove the eyesores. Just like you walk out the front of your house and there's an empty drink bottle in your driveway or on your lawn. It just blew there or someone threw it there. You just pick it up and throw it in the trash, and all of a sudden your yard looks a little bit better. Versus leaving it out there and acting like the wind will take care of it, kind of the front of your house isn't quite as clean as it could be. So by cleaning up your tank, by making sure the glass is clean, removing the dead and the decaying stuff, you'll feel better about it already, and you'll remove the reminders of the things that you have lost for one reason or another. So I wouldn't... I would really push that on you, actually. I'd actually highly recommend you do that. So yes, I'm telling you reach in your tank after telling you not to reach in your tank. But we're doing it to clean things up, to give it a bump in the right direction, and then get your hands out of the tank and let it be. Now, if you're impatient, which a lot of people are, then you're going to have to keep your expectations realistic. That things are going to not be as smooth as you hoped, and there are chances things are going to go wrong. And the more you push, the harder you go at this thing, the more likely things are going to go wrong. I'd like to add more fish to my tank, and my tank's been running for years. And I would love to put in a bunch of Anthias. But at the same time, I also think, do I want to run the risk of introducing some weird parasite into my tank, some weird infection, some kind of fish disease? So what's the alternative? Well, set up a quarantine tank, put them to safety stop, get them out of safety stop, and put them inside the quarantine tank, observe for 3 weeks, treat them for anything that may show up if it happens, and then introduce them in my tank. That limits all the risk of fish disease, which is really important. But I've also found that when I put fish in a quarantine tank, a lot of times they die in there. And it's almost like, and I knew a hobbyist in Dallas, his name was Rick, and he just said, I will never use a quarantine tank. All the fish I buy go in quarantine die. I always put them right in my reef because they have a way better chance of living in there than they do in a quarantine tank. And I can't disagree with this thought. I mean, it's not the safe approach, it's not the smart approach, but it's the realistic approach. So that's why I'm a big proponent for safety stop, to remove the external parasites. I just had a friend today write me, and she said, I think there's velvet in my tank. How do I get a hold of that fish vet? And so I gave her the link because she's in the local area. So, we all care about our pets and we don't want to take a chance with them, which is, I think, one of the reasons why we don't just keep buying fish after fish after fish. We buy a few and then we kind of hold off and sometimes just leave it alone. We just don't want to mess with success, so to speak. And that way, the ones that are in there are doing really well. If we put in a new guy, it could be territorial issues, it could be disease issues. Those are a couple of the main problems that could happen with a new tank, with a new introduction into your tank. But the rest of the time, I understand the desire to get more things. When I was scrolling through Facebook, I guess a week ago or so, so many people were posting pictures of fish. I was like, oh, I wish I had that. Oh, I wish I had that. But it was fleeting and it passed and I'm okay. If I do something at some point, I don't know what it'll be, but I would like to add something in the future to my tank. But the tank is established and the fish are, they all get along with each other because they've been together for a long time. And so there's part of me that wants to just leave it alone and not mess with success. So I'm just saying the same thing to you. You want to think it through and decide, is this the right move or is this the wrong move? Does your tank need another fish? Are you just impulsively adding it? Or is there a real upside to adding it? So you have to, I don't know, do a pros and cons list and see what's best for you. But okay, so we did that. Now, when it comes to corals, of course, a lot of people buy little frags. Very few people buy colonies. We like to grow them in, and you have to wait a long time for these corals to get larger in your system. That's not a downside. That's not a negative, like I was saying, when you're comparing success to failure. If anything, growing them out yourself has a lot of benefits. Number one, frags tend to do so much better than colonies. Number two, you grow it out, you get a sense of accomplishment. Plus, you get to enjoy the ride. You get to see it change over time. You get to see it bigger. You get to snip a piece off and plant it somewhere else in your reef tank and, kind of mix up the colors in your tank and kind of create a nice collage of reef corals. And we really enjoy that. And at least I do. I love it. So, I guess it all comes together, because if I tell you be patient, if I tell you don't buy a lot of corals, if I tell you not to buy a lot of fish, that actually works in your favor. It's saving you money, and it's saving you heartache, and it helps you learn more and more patience. And I guess I can't overemphasize how important patience is in this hobby. It absolutely is. It's not like any other hobby I can think of. And I don't know all the hobbies. I'm just saying, this one you have to really take your time. And I just encourage you to do that. So, okay, let's say you have set up a new tank. You bought a bunch of nice gear, which a lot of people do these days. They spend a lot of money on gear, and yet the tank doesn't look that great. But it's got like the best gear, so it should look great. That's the thought process. And a lot of times we collectively, those with experience will say, the gear isn't so much as, it's very important, but it's not the absolute route for success, because a lot of times we'll say, well, if you didn't have that gear and you stuck to the basics, your tank would probably do quite well. And back to the basics is a lot less of the cool gear we like. It would be steady lighting, every single day, not some weird schedule with cloud cover and rainstorms and new moon versus full moon. If you just went to a steady light schedule, if you had a steady temperature, if you did a regular water change, if you manually dosed such and such instead of relying on dosers that mess up on you, suddenly your tank would just start doing better. And it's because it's very simplistic. We've actually overcomplicated it with a lot of nice gear. And I have a lot of gear under my tank. That area under my stand looks full right now. And my tank is, it's used to it. It's not something that happened overnight. And so I guess we could put my tank in the success column. It's done really, really well with minimal issues that have popped up over the last 6.5 years. Let's see. All right, so some negatives or some things where one would think their tank is unsuccessful would be nuisance algae everywhere, probably cyanobacteria issues, possibly dinoflagellates happening all over the sand bed and on the rock. protein skimmers that overflow all the time, livestock that just doesn't grow. If anything, you put it in and you just watch it wither away, and you buy a new thing and you put it in, it withers away. Put in another thing and it withers away. You know, and then the same thing with fish. You buy fish and they don't make it, and you buy another fish and it doesn't make it. So you buy a third fish and it doesn't make it. And you're just, that would be in the failure column. So that's when you have to start looking at what are you doing specifically differently from the majority of the population of the hobby, and how are they doing it successfully? How are they able to buy a new fish at the store time after time, go through the acclimation, do whatever they do, and then put it in the tank and have a success story? And why do you not? So we need to figure out what they're doing versus what you're doing, and then you're going to have to adapt and make some changes or apply some new patterns, some new procedures that could put you in the success column. And the same thing goes with corals. You know, when we set up, okay, in the old days, if you set up a brand new tank and you got it cycled and you added your fish, then what we would do is we would buy one coral, just one. I don't even know what it was. I mean, usually it was something really hardy like a leather, and we put that in the tank and see what it did. And if it did well, we might in a few weeks add another coral. And instead what I'm seeing is a lot of people in this time period, you know, this decade, where they set up a new tank, they really have no experience, they saw things they like, and so they'll spend a lot of money on a lot of SPS frags, which SPS corals, or small polyp stony corals, are not the easy coral. They're the hard one. And to jump into the deep end of the pool, so to speak, as a new hobbyist, it's kind of a recipe for a failure. I mean, it just is. You know, there are some that will be able to do it, and they'll be able to say, hey, I did it, and there's no big deal, and my tank looks great. And that's few and far between. But SPS corals are usually the last coral you add. We usually add the soft corals, the easy corals, the things that grow quickly. And then as you graduate, as you get further in, and by the way, I did a live stream about tank maturity that has been very popular. I noticed it, I just checked, and it's had 30,000 views. So that topic really resonated with a lot of you. And tank maturity, or really hobbyist maturity, is so important to have a successful tank. Now, I do want to take a quick second to tell you that my doorbell is going to be ringing in a few minutes here, and I will have to dart away for a second. My son drove into town to pick up something, and he is going to interrupt the stream. But I just want to let you know. All right, so if you're putting in a lot of corals in a new tank and they don't do well, I would say stop doing that. I'd rather you put in one or two and focus on water stability and enjoy that coral that you got, the one or two you got, and just really get into those. And don't do anything else. Don't spend any more money. I'm trying to save you money. And that way you can see how they do, and if they are doing well, then you could say, okay, I'm going to get a few more. Whether it's an LPS coral or zoanthids or something along those lines. That way your tank can grow gradually. You can plant, and here's the other thing. If you buy a lot of corals, what are you probably going to do? More than likely, I hope you do it. I hope you dip your corals to make sure there's no pests on them. And then you're going to want to put them in your tank, and most likely you're going to want to use putty or glue. So if you buy a lot of corals at one time and you use a lot of putty or glue at one time to secure them all in your tank, you're changing the water parameters because you're putting in, let's just call them toxins, quote unquote. The glue and the putty are reef safe in reason. If you use an entire block of putty in one session, your tank is not going to do well. But if you secure 2 or 3 frags today, and then in a few days you secure 2 or 3 more, you're only using a limited amount of putty at a time, and your protein skimmer won't overflow, and your corals won't look stressed because it's minimal. You're only bothering it a little tiny bit versus going full tilt like spring cleaning. It's just too much at one time. So we want to be reasonable, we want to be balanced, you want to be patient, you want to take your time. And if you do these things, I think that you'll see success more rapidly than trying to do the instant reef approach. So I'm trying to encourage you to go that direction and just kind of let your tank blossom. Now I want to say there are some guys out here on this channel that have some beautiful reef tanks. And I just recently added someone to Club Milo's Reef, and the guy posted a picture of his tank. He's like, wow! And he said, I've been watching Mark's streams and I've learned so much, and here's my tank. Now I'm not saying I get all the credit, because that would be stupid. But I've given him enough tips that whatever he was lacking, he apparently found benefit from, and he's been applying it. And man, has he been applying some His tank is beautiful. So, if you're not part of Club Meals Reef, please do join. Let me throw that on the screen really quick to remind you guys where it is. It's on Facebook. It's facebook.com/groups/MeLovesReef. And that area is designed for hobbyists to talk with each other all week long. We answer questions, we share our tanks like this person did, which I love. The more you do that, the happier I am. I love seeing your tank, seeing your favorite coral, seeing your favorite fish. Maybe your equipment area you're really proud of. I want to see it. And I scroll through the comments. I don't get to comment on everything, but I do go through it. And if you need me for some reason in that group, you can tag me. You can just tag Milos Reef Inc. Or you can tag Mark Levinson. Either one will get my attention. And if that doesn't work, you can ask one of the moderators to tag me or someone else, and they'll do it. And then it'll bubble up into my notifications, and I'll come check it out. Now, if thousands of you do it, I may not see it all. But for now, it's been manageable. We have about 7,600 people in the group, and a lot of them came from YouTube, which is awesome. There's also some that are there from Facebook. And the group was designed specifically to help you with your tank and to let you feel comfortable to ask questions and not feel like you're going to be berated or put down. We just don't allow that in the group, and we nip threads in the bud that try. So we try to gather up a group of good people and let the rest of the world burn down. But our group is going to be this nice little happy island in the middle of the internet. So you're welcome to join that. If your tank is dealing with algae, like I mentioned before, and it's just getting out of control, and you've tried this, you've tried that, you went with Vibrant, you used fluconazole, you pulled some out, you tried to lower phosphates, but you're not having success, I'm going to just throw this out there. Odds are your cleanup crew isn't big enough. Now, that doesn't mean if you have a tank that's just moving with algae back and forth like a forest, I don't know that throwing in 1,000 snails is going to get rid of that, because it's just too much plant life. But if you rip out as much as you can manually and then add the cleanup crew to get what you couldn't reach, the last bits you couldn't get with your fingertips, they will get the rest of it. And then your tank can be pretty. And last week I shared with you guys my water parameters. I didn't have a chance to test my water yet today like I hoped. Today was kind of an off day. But last week when I measured my phosphates, they were 0.75, which is a lot. And people are like, how is that possible? I'm like, it's my tank. I feed my reef, and phosphates are up. But I've been using Phosphate RX to knock it down. I haven't tested yet. We'll have to see where they are today. I'll test that. Today is water test Saturday. And we do want to test our water and see what our parameters are so we can see if we need to add more of something or less of something. And if you don't test, you won't know. So I'm going to keep bugging you to test your water. And if you can, post your results on Instagram. You can tag @MeLovesReef. You can use hashtag water test results. Water testing day, these are a couple of hashtags I use. And of course, if you @MeLovesReef, I get to see your parameters. Make sure your stuff's set to public too. If it's set to private, I can't see it. And then if you want to share it in Club Meals Reef, we love to see your parameters too. It makes us feel good. It makes us feel like we weren't the only ones testing. So it's an important thing that I think we should all be doing every Saturday. And Andrea, one of the moderators in this group, she tested her water on Wednesday and said, I know it's supposed to be Saturday, but I'm a busy mom and I moderate the group and I moderate the chat on YouTube. So I'm doing it on Wednesday, and she shared her numbers with us, which was kind of a fun middle of the week thing that we're not used to seeing. But that was great. So if phosphates are up in your tank, you do need to bring them down, because that will help reduce the growth of algae in your tank. But if you have a lot of algae, then you definitely have phosphate, even if you have a test kit, an ultra low nutrient test kit, like the Hannah Checker, the ultra low one. It's saying, no, you've got nothing. It's like, well, your tank's full of algae, you definitely have phosphate. So you're going to have to remove as much manually, and you're going to put in the snails. And then you're probably going to need to treat for phosphates, because it's probably in the water, even though the test kit gave you a false reading. Myself, like I said before, I use Phosphate RX. There's other products on the market like Phosban L. There is, of course, a lot of people like to use GFO, but you need to use the right amount. If you use too much because you don't know how much to use and you strip the water, it leans you into other problems. And that can lead you to have an issue with things breaking out like dinoflagellates. Speaking of dinoflagellates, I want to remind you guys about this, or let you know about this. So Cruz Arias is a guy that helps a lot of people. He's been on Reef Dude's live stream several times. And he has a group specifically to get rid of dinoflagellates on Facebook. And he himself has a health issue. So I'm going to put the link to this inside the chat. And after the show, I'm going to stick it in the description of this video. But someone set up a GoFundMe for him specifically. They're trying to raise $5,000. And it's because his, I always mix up these two organs. Kidney. He's having a problem with his kidneys and needs a transplant. And so he's asking if anyone can help. Well, actually, someone's asking for him. He didn't ask for it. Someone else is organizing this. And he's looking for either a donor or he's looking for some money to help toward the procedure. But he's looking for, specifically it said they're looking for an A+ donor. And maybe some of you know what that is, but I guess that's a blood type, right? A+? I actually do not know my own blood type. I've asked my doctor, and she said, well, we have to test. I'm thinking, really? Shouldn't that be like my name, my date of birth, my blood type? I mean, shouldn't that be in the records? I don't know. I have no idea what mine is, but some people do know. So he's looking for a kidney, whether it's here in the US or overseas. He doesn't even care. He just wants to live. And so he's asking for help. And I want to be sure to include that in the stream because he's been helping a lot of people for a long time. And it's his turn to get some help back. Also, while I'm talking about bad news, you may have seen the news already on Facebook, but we recently lost someone this week, 2 days ago, and it was very sudden and no one expected it. So Bob Fenner, who owns Wet Web Media and is a personal friend of mine and I've gone scuba diving with, he died in his sleep 2 days ago. And I mean, he didn't even mention he was sick. So I don't know specifically, the dirty nitty gritty, but he's no longer with us. So Reef to Rainforest did a really nice write-up. I also did a small write-up for my local club about Bob, so I'll put that in here as well. Bob Fenner was such a, man, this man lived his life. He was always happy. I can't even think of when he complained about anything. Even when his back was hurting and we were on a dive, he just struggled through it until he got in the water and he was comfortable. And I was like, "Are you sure you're okay?" And he says, "I'm trying to get scheduled for surgery, and I just haven't had time." And we would go and help lift his gear out of the water to take it off of his body, to, one less stress on his spine. And he had a problem with his knee. It was just all these things, and he never complained. He loved to drink. He loved his running club in San Diego, and he would every week would prepare food for the runners. For when they came back from the run, he'd have all the tables out, and he had this rolling kitchen that he would drive up with, and then he'd put out a table with all those heated chafing dishes, and he would serve their food and drinks. He was such a giver. And every single day on Facebook, he posted a picture of a coral or a fish, and where he took the picture, and its identification, and maybe some information. And he made friends everywhere. So he had a huge following. His book is behind me. I can't get to it right now. But The Conscientious Marine Aquarist was a staple in almost every hobbyist library 10 years ago or longer. And I met him at MACNA 2002, my very first MACNA I ever went to, and I heard his talk. He was one of the 15 speakers I listened to, and I became friends. I mean, he was one of those people that you could start talking to him, and you felt like he was your friend forever. Like you've always been friends. And he would really listen. He would tell you if you're crazy. Like if you said something like a friend of mine posted on Facebook saying, "I told Bob I just opened my fish store." And Bob looked him right in the eye and says, "Why would you do something that stupid?" And then he spent an hour giving him encouragement and telling him what he could do and what to avoid and how to make it successful. And no, super nice guy. Suddenly he's gone. I mean, it was so unexpected. In a way, it's good that it wasn't one of these things where something bad happened, he's in the hospital for 3 or 4 weeks with a lingering death. In that regard, he got really lucky. Probably the best way to go is to go in your sleep. And so that's what happened for him. And I'm really sad. I've got a lot of friends that are very sad. And I'll tell you this, despite the sadness of this story, what made me happy and sad was that my entire Facebook, because I have so many mutual friends, was all about Bob. I could just scroll, and there was everyone talking about Bob, how they missed him, how they couldn't believe it, how they were shocked, how they didn't have words. They shared so many pictures of him. It was just like Facebook turned over to Bob Fenner. And there was, occasional something in there, but almost nothing. It was all about Bob. And I was like, this is amazing, and I love this. And the part that made me a little bit sad was I wish Bob could see this. I wish he was alive to watch this reaction and then go, just so you could, I don't know, feel good. But no, he helped a lot of people. A lot of people met him. A lot of people never met him but got his help. And, so there's a lot of regret right now that he's gone. There's no one's going to replace that guy. There's no way. When we were on our dive trip in Bonaire last year, we did 14 dives together, he and I. He was my dive buddy. And, every day he'd get up, and when I got up, because I don't get up in the morning like people, I get up later. But I got up, I tried to get up earlier, and when I got up, he was already at his computer, going through pictures from yesterday's dive and identifying everything, putting them in folders, giving them their Latin name. He was super organized that way. And he probably took 1 or 2 pictures and put them on Facebook from the Wi-Fi at our hotel room. Then he spent time preparing his camera, getting ready for the dive for the day. And then we were all off in the kitchen making our breakfast together and, passing the bacon and all that kind of stuff until we all had our food. And then we headed out to our next dive spot and we go diving. And he was fun to dive with. He had a huge camera. It was almost always a Nikon with his giant strobe and another light. And he would go down with this thing and take pictures of fish and take pictures of corals. And it didn't matter what position. Normally you would think he'd be shooting like this, right in front of himself and just click. But there'd be times where he's completely upside down and doing almost like an inverted somersault as he's getting pictures of something, or swimming after something, or checking over his shoulder to make sure I'm still there. And then he'd go deeper. And, I'm going to miss him. So we had some good experiences. I got to see him usually about once a year at MACNA, or maybe I ran into him in California at one of their local club events. I noticed, actually, MetroCat pointed out to me that Marine Depot even gave him a shout out. If you went to marinedepot.com, the logo of the website says right underneath, "Thank you, Bob Fenner." And I was just like, aw. And, because he was loved, like I said. So anyway, we lost a great man. His memories will never be forgotten because there's too many people talking about him, and you can... Anyway, I need to stop talking about this before I start falling apart. Let me start going into your questions. I know that my son's going to show up soon, so I'd like to start heading in that way. Also, I want to thank all of you for tuning in today. And also, I want to mention that some states are starting to open up and, saying, you can go back to work, or you can go to restaurants, you can go to stores. Just keep being careful, because I don't think anyone really knows what is truly safe. And one of my friends who's a nurse in Alaska, she was furious yesterday. She was so mad. She wrote this giant post on Facebook and says, you can say whatever you want. I don't even care. I'm not even coming back to read what your reply is. But she has to put on all the protective gear, and she's dealing with life and death with patients that are trying to survive COVID-19. And she said all these conspiracy theories and these videos are just making her so mad, because it's like everything she's doing is pointless. Like, why is she even doing it? Because it's all a hoax. And, I could totally understand her viewpoint. I shared it on my wall as well. And I wrote her a private message and said, hang in there. Because not all of us think that we're being misled by the government. This thing is so big. It's global, okay? It's a pandemic around the world. It's not just the U.S. cooked up some crazy thing and some bad guy did this. This is way beyond that. So be safe, be careful, be cautious, and hopefully you will be able to avoid this for as long as possible. And I'm just, hoping for the day when there is some kind of a cure or a inoculation we can take to protect those, protect ourselves and those we interact with, so we don't just carry it on to the next person. All right, I know this isn't... I've had people say, you don't know this topic, this is, just be quiet about it, but I do care about living. And when I was at the fish store yesterday, I had my mask on, and they, and Frank says, "How are you doing?" I said, "I'm still alive." So that part's good, so, be careful. Let's see. First question here is by Macy's Daddy. He said, "How have you overcome expensive corals dying? Do you replace it, move on, or leave the hobby?" Well, I don't leave the hobby. That's the one thing. I am very dogmatic about sticking it out and not ever walking away. I don't buy a lot of expensive corals. You know, I've spent a few hundred on one coral. I've spent $80 on a frag, you know, and then, you know, I hope for the best. And if it doesn't make, if it doesn't make, what kind of English is that? If it doesn't make it, then I just look at it as I shouldn't have done that. I just wasted $80. You know, it was just like, I could have burned it, I could have flushed it. Why did I even go to this trouble? You know, it's kind of a bothersome thing, but it doesn't make me quit the hobby. And really, I don't like to buy expensive corals. I'd prefer to trade corals with other hobbyists. Sometimes people give me a frag, which is nice. Sometimes I give them a frag too. You know, it's reciprocal to some degree. But I don't let the cost... See, that's the thing. If you are only buying high-end corals, possibly with the reason you're going to frag it and recoup your money, I kind of feel like you're missing the point of the hobby. The hobby should not be about recouping. Most hobbies that you do cost you money, and you enjoy them because they're your hobby. And for some reason, the saltwater hobby seems to always be, how can I make money and make it pay for itself? And that's really not reality for the majority of hobbyists. So I don't choose to buy them. I've got a friend, he loves high-end corals, and he grows them very well. And he's been sending me texts to my phone showing these vivid little frags that are puddling out onto the rock, and they're just stunning. And you know, every one of them has a fancy nickname, and you know, he's really enjoying himself, and he's really good at SPS corals. So I'm not worried about him or thinking it's not going to go well. And he is watching his water parameters like a chemist. He is on top of it. 1 drop of this, 3 drops of that, you know. And you know, my nitrates are 2, and my phosphate is what did he say? 0.319. I mean, it was so... His parameters are so tight. And he loves that stuff. And you know, for me, I want to just enjoy my tank. I don't want it to be that much effort, that much work. So I overcome it by not buying it, Macy's daddy. Let's see. Neil says, I'm super happy with my reef right now. The corals are growing and all my acros are colored up really well. Great color. That's excellent. Yvonne says, what would cause my chalice corals to turn gray? I've read several reasons. I'd like your opinion. If a coral turned gray or lost its coloration, it's either that there's a lack of food in the tank, low nutrients, or it could be there's too much bacteria, like your carbon dosing, or the lights ran too long. Maybe they ran overnight, you know, and you didn't even know they were still on, or the tank got too hot. I mean, these are some of the things that could happen. I had a chalice, well, I still do, on the end of my tank, way off on the far end of this tank. There's a chalice on the screen right now. Anyways, the other end of the tank, and it's an area that's really shaded under that big brown finger gorgonian. And it had like all these like white splotches. And I was sure the cold tang was biting it. Not to like eat it, but more like kiss and suck, if that makes sense. And was sucking the coral out, the color out of the coral. And I thought, well, I guess that coral is going to be gone because the coal has discovered it's edible. But that coral is recovering. So apparently it wasn't anything related to a fish, from what I can tell. And like I said, it's in a shaded area, so it doesn't get nearly as much light as it probably would appreciate. But it's not dead either. So sometimes we just have to kind of like look back and see what is happening in our tanks. With yours being, I mean, gray, that's a very specific color. It almost makes me think the color of the coral is clear and you're almost seeing the underneath, you know, to see gray. And have you looked at under white light or have you only looked under blue light? So maybe that would help a little bit. But those are some of my thoughts. You know, of course, there's going to be the obvious things like, is your alkalinity too high? Is magnesium and calcium where they belong? But I almost think it's a nutrient or a bleaching event that's happened. You know, a lack of nutrients or there's a bleaching going on because of too much of something. Those are my 2 thoughts, like carbon dosing. Crisscross says, do you know why my pH is going above 8.5? I have the apex reading 8.2 for the lowest and 8.54 for the highest. Is that normal? It's a little bit high, a little bit higher than we like. Usually if you have a tank that crosses 8.5, the SPS corals will stress. And you'll see like filaments coming off of them because it's just the coral's not happy. You may even see LPS corals kind of close up tight temporarily, like little fists of fury. But the question is that pH reading accurate? Is it correct? Is there any chance there's something wrong? Or maybe you might want to calibrate it one more time. Or maybe you could take a cup of tank water, I'm sorry, not tank water, a cup of new salt water you've mixed up, and take the pH probe out of your sump and put it in that cup and see what the measurement is of the new batch of salt water, just to see if you get a low rating at all. Or does it always measure kind of crazy high? Like I said, it seems a little unusual to be that high, but if your alkalinity is high and your calcium is high and your magnesium's on target and your salinity is correct and you're dosing alkalinity or you're dosing kalkwasser, it could keep it up a little higher. But it's not very common to be 8.5. 8.3 is the target. Most people are 8.0 to 8.3 each day. So you're running 0.2 higher than everyone for some weird reason. Waleed says, I'm running a skimmer rated for 200 gallons on a tank that's 130 gallons. Is that okay? Yes, it is. I love easy questions. Ask me more of those. Callie says, I have a pretty big aptasia problem. I'm going to gradually keep adding peppermints every other week or so. Should I go for the babies or should I look for juveniles? You're going to have a hard time finding baby peppermint shrimp. It's very uncommon you'll see that. Normally they kind of look normal size, medium to large. And you can also kill the aptasia and let the peppermints get what's left. You could use kalk paste, which is kalkwasser, the powder, and you mix it with just a little bit of water so it's a paste like you're making glue, and pull it up in one of those plastic syringes, and you can turn off the flow in your tank and put the syringe right over the aptasia and coat it with that kalk paste. It'll just burn the aptasia, and then the peppermint shrimp will come over and they'll eat what's left. And so it can be like teamwork, between you and the peppermints. You can try using F-Aptasia. I sell it in my shop, and that's gotten really good reviews from a lot of people around the world. Even reef builders did it right up when they discovered it. So that one's a pretty popular one, and that was invented by the people over here at Frank's Tanks, which is kind of cool. But keep in mind that peppermints can be a little destructive to other corals in your tank later on, especially when the aptasias are gone. So like if you have things like fungias, they might pick at them and rip food right out of their mouths and irritate the heck out of those fungias to where they just start withering away. And you may have to remove the peppermints or put them somewhere else. Something to keep in mind. Lefty says, I'm new to the hobby, still working out the details, but what, if any, is sump to tank size and refugium ratio? I like to have a sump that will fill the stand and use up every square inch. I really like that. I like to have lots of room in the sump to work, and the bigger the sump, the more water it can hold in the event of a power outage, and it gives me room for any equipment I might ever add. Now you ask, what should the ratio be? I mean, if you had a 40-gallon breeder and you could put a 40-gallon breeder underneath as your sump, technically it could hold pretty much every drop from above, other than there's already water in the sump. And there's people that have like a really tiny nano tank with a huge sump underneath, and it does really well. If you go with too small a sump, you have no room for equipment, there's a risk it'll overflow, and you'll end up with a mess to clean up. So I do like larger. And then you asked for the ratio for refugium. I've always recommended you could have a refugium that's at least 10% of your display tank. So if you have a 100-gallon tank, you need a 10-gallon refugium. It needs to be decent sized to actually be what I consider beneficial to the tank. Spencer says, I want to try my hand, I want to try my hand at making an acrylic tank, and the only stuff available to me is 0.22 extruded from big box stores. Would that be okay for a 10 to 15-gallon tank? Yes, it can be. I'm not a fan of it, but yes, it absolutely can. And think about it. A lot of sumps are made of 1/4-inch acrylic, which is usually 0.22 millimeters. And no, 0.22 of an inch. It's something like, I don't even remember the number now in millimeters. But if you make the tank with a bottom, the 4 walls, and a top piece with a cutout to reach in, it'll be nice and strong. if you try to make it rimless, the whole thing's going to bulge outward, and you'll be unhappy. I have an entire section on my website about working with acrylic, with a lot of pictures of tools I used and tips of how to work with it, including how to route the acrylic, how to make the top flange with a jig. I mean, there's all that information in the acrylic section under articles. So if you can read through all that, you can definitely do it. Extruded is not going to be as nice as cast acrylic, but it'll do just fine, seriously, especially when you're trying something out for the first time. Why spend a lot of money on something that could be very simple, and you can just enjoy it for a while? And I mean, my very first thing I made was at an 1/8 inch, and I made a sump. And I did the top flange because I didn't want to bow out, and it worked out really well, but I replaced it because everyone said, 1/8 inch, are you out of your mind? So eventually, a year later, I made a 1/4 inch one, and I used it ever since. Oh, I mean, for the rest of that tank's life, for a total, that tank lived to be 7 years old. So I probably had that sump under there at a 1/4 inch for probably 4 or 5 years. And a lot of the sumps I built are 1/4 inch. So yeah, holding 10 or 15 gallons, not a problem at all. Insane Reefer, thank you for the super chat. He says, I can't seem to set the low or high pH on my Neptune PM1. Do I need the pH probe to set that? I would think so, yeah. I mean, I'm not 100% sure. I do run a PM1 and I have a pH probe plugged in, but I haven't set anything like for alerts. And it just measures and tells me the results. I have that one set up connected to my main Apex system to track the pH, the temperature of my frag system. There's a Neptune group on Facebook that's very helpful. And then NeptuneSystems.com has a community forum that's been around forever that answers every question you can imagine. And you could probably find the answer to that question already typed 1,000 times in that group and just read the answer and just go do it. So I would suggest that. A lot of times I wonder why people come to like Club Meals Reef and ask a question about their Radeon or ask a question about their Apex, when I'm thinking you could ask the Ecotech people, you could ask the Apex people. You know, not saying you can't ask other groups, and yes, someone may know the answer, but I like to go to the source. That's what I do. Max says, I have some weird algae that looks like coralline, but it's green. Could you tell me what it is? Also, zoas and alveopore are okay. Are they okay close to each other? Yes, I think those two would be fine near each other. The alveopores and LPS. The zoas are going to be a little bit down lower, more than likely, so they're under it, like the skirt of the coral. Shouldn't be a problem. If the zoanthids grow up on the LPS for some weird reason, you might have to peel some away. I love alveopore. I think they're gorgeous. That was the end of that video. Let's switch to the other one. Okay. And then the question about coralline. So coralline can be in 3 different colors: pink, purple, green, actually 4. It can be reddish. There's different colors of it, and it's possible you're looking at one that's green. This is so cool. I love the way the background blended on the area I'm actually in to fit in the video. Side point. Okay. Insane Reefer says, can I use any pH calibration fluid like the Milwaukee brand to calibrate my Neptune pH probe? Yes, you definitely can. My friend Dwayne buys it in bulk, and he gets these bottles. I don't know what brand they are, but he gets these bottles and he pours a little bit into this little acrylic beaker thing he made where he can stand all of his probes and measure and calibrate each one. It's pretty creative, and we were joking about how hard it would be for me to recreate that little tiny thing he made to, you know, like offer them in my website. It's just too much work to make something so tiny. And yeah, I totally agree. It's way too much work. So I'm not going to do it. But he buys the bigger bottle so it lasts a long time. He opens the cap, pours a little bit out, seals the cap, keeps it safe, so it will last a longer period of time. But those packets are usually your safest bet because they are 7. You know, they come in 4, 7, and 10. And you peel it open, you put the probe in, you shake it a little bit, let it sit for 20 seconds or so to get your measurement, and you throw it away. And the next time you do it, you use a brand new packet. There's no contaminants. It didn't expire. It didn't go bad. You know, so I actually, just in my recent order to Neptune Systems, I placed an order for reagents too. pH probe calibration solution. So it'll be in my shop in case any of you guys need that in the future. I did order reagents too. Neptune Systems is back to work, in case you guys weren't aware, and they are trying to do their backlog of orders that happened during the closed period, and they are selling reagents for the Trident, but they are not selling 6-month pack, and I have no idea if they will sell any 6-month pack kits in the next year. It may not even happen until 2021. So at this point, your only choice if you own a Trident is to keep buying 2-month kits. And so I ordered a bunch for the customers that have been waiting for, that have already bought them for me a month and a half ago, and I'm waiting for those to come in so I can get those orders taken, and then I will place an order for more to have in the shop in case you need any. Since I mentioned the shop, I'll throw this on the screen. Please shop for MillersReef.com. I do appreciate when you do. It helps pay the bills and it keeps me busy. So I can never say I'm bored, because I'm never bored. I'm a little jealous that you guys can say, I'm so bored, I can't stand it in my house. I'm just like, I'm here every day. I don't even know what that's like. Okay, Alexander addressed something that I was talking about earlier during the topic and said, I used to think all the gear is the better the reef, so you have really cool gear, you'll do better. But it just became more stuff to keep up with and to clean. So in February, I cleaned house and went simple. Skimmer, doser, ATO. And I'm in love again. So yeah, it can be a very simple system and do really well. I'm looking for the next question. By the way, in case you haven't caught on in the chat, if you put add Miller's Reef, I see your question. If you don't, I might miss it. So I'm looking for all the questions that start with add Miller's Reef. Okay, Saif says, can you give me any idea about polyp bailout? I faced some with LPS corals. They're fine for 1 or 1.5 months, and then they just bail out from the base. And this has happened with 3 different purchases. Maybe what's happening is you have something in a tank that's pulling the polyp right off the skeleton. Whether it's a fish that's nipping, or like I was talking about peppermint shrimp, or pecking at it and it's just giving up. It's not common for a polyp to bail from its skeletal base. It's usually a last-ditch effort out of desperation, and it should be rare. It shouldn't be each coral you get each time. That tells me it's something else is causing it. It's not normal. I've got a whole tank full of LPS corals over there, and I think I had 1 polyp that fell, and I just ignored it. And it grew on the rock and made a bunch of polyps. It was a cute little colony the size of a golf ball or smaller. But the big colony kept getting bigger and bigger, and that got shaded, and that thing just ended up withering away. I should have moved it into a spot with more light. But I didn't, because I don't get my arm wet. But the fact that you're having things come out, that you're losing polyps repeatedly, I think something's going on in the tank. I think somebody's messing with it. There's a possibility there's some kind of pollutant, and you could do a ICP test and see if there's anything weird, like way too much aluminum in your tank, for example, or something like that. But odds are you're just dealing with, I think there's a fish or a shrimp that's causing the chaos. That's my guess. And I hope you figure it out. And if you do figure it out, I want you to tell me. Screams Reef says, what are those green and orange acans? They look super nice. The green and orange you were looking at is probably my Lobophilia. Waleed's Reef says, I removed my filter socks and I see no changes. Do you recommend them? So you see no changes, then does it mean you even need them? Because you didn't see a change. Usually people are running filter socks for a couple of reasons. One is to stop microbubbles where the water pours in the sump. Another is to catch particulates, to keep things from blowing around in the tank. I guess the third reason would be to keep the sump clean longer. But I don't like running socks. I don't run socks in my tank unless I absolutely have to. And it's usually very rare, 3 or 4 times a year I break out a sock and I do some serious cleaning. But the rest of the time I don't, because it's less for me to clean. So no, I don't actually recommend them. I don't build sumps that hold socks. I actually suggest people don't use them. But if you are a sock user, then I recommend you have enough socks to replace them every 3 days in your tank for an entire month before you have to wash any. So if your sump has 1 sock holder and you need to replace it every 3 days, you're going to need 10 socks. If your sump has 2 socks, you're going to need 20 socks just to make it through the month. And then after 3 days, it's dirty. You take it out, you put it in a diaper pail, put the lid on top so you don't smell it, and you put in some new socks. And after 3 days, you change it again. And after 3 days, you change it again. And then finally, you've got this diaper pail full of socks, and you wash them all at once. Perrin asked me some specific questions. I don't think I know the answer. Hi all from New Zealand. Could you recommend some good fish and how many for a Red Sea Reefer Nano? It's a 30-gallon cube with a sump with a Deltec skimmer. It's hard to recommend what fish because everyone has different taste. Like for example, what if you love Royal Grama and all you want is 15 of those? Or maybe you really like a very specific look of a clownfish and you want to get that pair of clownfish. But with a 30-gallon tank, you are limited to how many fish you can put in total. I would think if you're using medium to small size fish, you might have 5 to 7 fish in that tank, and that's about it. I wouldn't put anything that's going to get big. Nothing like a tang. It's too small. So that would be it. And then, you know, it comes down to what you want to look at. Like, for example, what if you like a long-nosed butterfly? I had one of those, my 29-gallon briefly. Really pretty fish, but it likes to eat things I cared about, like feather dusters. And so I ended up taking the fish back to the store. Cindy says, I never test phosphates. Is that important? Yes! Yes, it's important. Lamont, thank you very much for the super chat. Last night, I've seen hundreds of babies of turbo snails. Hundreds of babies of turbos. I wonder if they're actually turbo snails. That'd be really cool. Jamie, your tests are coming out really good. He says that he tested before the stream. His nitrate is 25 and his phosphates are 0.04. That's pretty good. I know people want nitrates to be a little bit lower than that, but you know, you've seen my tank with way more and it's doing well. But I cannot wait to test again because you know the turf scrubber's been working its magic, and I want to see the trend. I want to watch. I hope I'm going to watch the nitrate just drop. We'll see. Donald says, is a UV sterilizer beneficial in a nano with dinoflagellates? Yes. If the dinos are waterborne and they are going through the UV light, then it will kill those. It'll kill any bacteria that goes through the light. And it is one approach that some have used. But is it guaranteed to get rid of it all? Maybe not. Stan, if you are able to help Cruz Arias with his need, that would be awesome. Callie says, have you seen a situation where aptasia can upset corals so much they begin to cause coral warfare and cause other corals to STN, RTN, or discolor? Yeah, because it's just constantly being irritated. So when you have aptasia, you want to get rid of the aptasia. You want to just nuke them one way or another. Scrape them off, hit them with a laser, cover them with aptasia, cover them with aptasia X, use kalkwasser paste, use lemon juice, use acid. I mean, there's so many techniques people have used. For me, if I can remove a rock from the tank and scrape them off, that's my favorite. It's just fast. You just get it over with. You know, I spend 30 minutes over the sink and I'm done. But, you know, sometimes you have to work with what's already in your tank. Maybe the rockwork's all held together and you can't remove. And then there's things you can put in the tank that'll eat them. Bergia nudibranchs, filefish, peppermint, shrimp. And I'm sure I'm missing something else. But usually it's just, you want to get in there and remove them because they are irritating the corals, which causes problems for the corals. They're feeling attacked, and so they're retaliating, and it causes chaos in your tank. Sleeping Giant says, I got the Reef Trace app. Love how easy it is, and the graphs. Yeah, I know, it's really cool. I love the graphs. I think it looks super cool. Raul, thank you very much for the super chat. Wow. He said, I probably would not be in the hobby. Thanks for all the knowledge you share. I actually enjoy doing this each week with you guys. I guess my biggest concern is that I'm talking about the same stuff over and over. and I don't want to bore you guys. I want to always have something new and fresh and interesting to talk about. Brett Miller says, is cyanobacteria blooms seasonal? Yes, they are. I have 2 tanks that got it at the same time last week. Yeah. Yeah, it actually is seasonal. Usually it has to do with the way the light's coming into your home, and it's suddenly hitting the tank at a new angle because of, the angle of the Earth to the sun and the seasons. That was so unscientific. But no, yes, I do think that cyanobacteria is quite seasonal. It usually happens once or twice a year in our tanks, and it seems to usually correlate with a certain time of the year. And yeah, that definitely is a thing. And that's something I've been saying for a very long time. And so now you just need to treat your tank to get rid of it. Evan, thank you very much for the super chat. Says it's 5:45 in the morning in Australia. I'm feeding the baby in front of the TV. First time tuning in live. Keep doing what you're doing, Mark. Oh, thank you so much. I appreciate that. How old's your baby? And watch out for the dingo. That's a joke that we always see on Seinfeld. They say, the dingo ate your baby. I don't even know what that means, but it always made me laugh. I mean, I know what the words mean. I mean, I don't know where the saying came from. Chad asked a question, I don't know the answer, so I'll just read it. Would it be okay to put a Watchman goby and a pink spotted Luther goby in a 140-gallon tank? I don't know. I'm not a goby guy. Branson! He's watching from BBK in Dubai. So Branson, I got to meet him while I was in Dubai last November, and he drove me everywhere. Super nice guy. Oh, that's great. So, how do I say this? Bodhisattva told me Cruz is going to call me later today. Okay, great. I always see the name. I've never tried to say it out loud. You guys are tough. Waleed says, I watched YouTube, a video about a blue dotted sea hare eating cyanobacteria in a reef tank that can produce ink that they would spray into the tank. Sea hares can suddenly ink a tank. Now, it is possible. It's kind of not common. Don't hear it very often, but occasionally it happens. Usually from rough handling or mishandling of the animal. Relying on a sea hare to devour cyano might be ambitious, but you know what? You're right. I've remembered hearing about sea hares eating cyanobacteria, and there was someone that talked about it at MACNA many years ago. I totally forgot about this. And they had some video or pictures, probably, I can't remember which, and it showed like the red blanket on the sand, and it showed the little sea hares just like mowing it down. It was really cool. And I was like, wow, how cool is that? Because, we never talk about that. Totally forgot until you mentioned that. So yeah, I guess it's a possibility. If you end up going that route, I would love to hear your experience. Did it go well or not? Let me get rid of that thing off the screen. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to leave it there that long. Insane Reefer says, I noticed that since I put on my new Radions, Gen 5s, the blues, my corals are getting their colors back. And they are, well, where they were kind of gray, I think he tried to type. I'm not sure. Something got lost in translation in the end. But congratulations on getting your brand new lights. I'm a little jealous. I ordered a Gen 5 months ago, and I talked to them a couple weeks ago at Ecotech, and they said, yeah, we still don't have your XR15s yet, so you got to wait. So I'm like, all right. I ordered one for my frag system that I want to try out. But I'm glad to hear your corals are coloring up. That's good. What did you have before that made them look so different? The Fish Guy says, I have dosed Vibrant for 5 weeks now, and some of my corals bleach, like SPS corals, and my LPS seem to be pissed. But my flower anemone and my fish are fine. Should I stop the Vibrant? Yes, I would, only because you have bleaching corals and pissed off LPS. And because of that, I would be backing off on it. Uh, a few people, I've never used Vibrant myself. A few people have, and they say they love it and that it worked really well for them. So you might want to hop into Club Mila's Reef and see what they're doing differently or why they didn't have the same reaction in their tank that you did. Because something is up, something is interacting. It could be some weird combination like you're using Vibrant while running biopellets and these people didn't run biopellets, for example. I mean, it could be something as weird as that. Or maybe you've got the ceramic brick and they don't. You know, it's just, we we need to find the common approach and rule out all the weird how do you say it? Extraneous things that we so often incorporate into our systems that makes it harder to nail down the true approach to a solution. So in other words, if one guy has a tank and all he does is do water change and use Vibrant and nothing else, and you've got another tank that's got GFO, a biopellet reactor, a refugium, a turf scrubber, a protein skimmer, and does water changes, and it's not working for him, why? See, there's so many other things going on in that tank versus the first guy that only does water changes. So you would have to figure out why there's a problem. What do you need to turn off temporarily to make it work for you? And then maybe resume it once the problem's been corrected. Coral Lovers says, do you have any experience with Tropic Marin? I am looking to add trace elements like the Pro Coral A and Pro Coral K+, which is potassium. And can I mix two solutions to use one dosing pump? I don't know the answer to any of that. I haven't used any Tropic Marin products other than their Coral Dip, and that's the only one I used. I think I brought home a sample of their salt one time, which I used once, because it was a little box. Because carrying salt home on an airplane is insane. But no, I haven't used those things. I would talk to them. I would contact them directly and ask, can you combine these two parts together? And find out what they recommend. My gut would say dose them separately. But yeah, maybe there's something you can do, and you can mix them up. Oh, here we go. Robert says, my phosphates were 0.11. I dosed 6 drops of phosphate RX on a 60-gallon, which is nothing. And the yellow tang was sketchy, dazed, panting, but it's eating and it's okay now. The alkaline was 7.6 and I dosed in the morning. Yeah, don't dose. Okay, thank you. Wow. Need to find out if people are dosing in the morning when their pH and their alkaline is at the lowest. Because I've been trying to figure out why some people with the yellow tang have a problem and other people with the yellow tang don't, like me. And my own tank, I just dosed phosphate RX twice this week, and I specifically stood in front of the tank as the tank got cloudy and watched my yellows, and they just swam around like as if there was no phosphate RX in the tank. And it was enough that the tank turned cloudy. But using 6 drops in a 60-gallon is nothing. Mathematically, for your tank, and 0.11 is really nothing too, by the way. So I wouldn't even sweat that phosphate. Honestly, I would. Nothing bad about 0.1. 6 times. So if your phosphates were 0.5 in your tank, which they're not, they're 0.1. But if they're a 0.5, you're supposed to use 36 drops. And you only use 6. So, all right, let's just pretend that the problem was using it first thing in the morning. I really like to use I've always used my phosphate RX late at night. Always. Like 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock, 1 o'clock in the morning. That's when I dose it. So I'm going to start asking people what time they dosed. So thank you for chiming in on that. But your phosphates are so low, you don't need to treat. I really don't think. I mean, I know everyone's 0.03, but 0.1 is fine. Like I told you earlier in the stream, mine was 0.75 last week, and I'm still not worrying about it. Okay, so I've learned today that you guys ask a lot of questions I don't know the answers to. The fish guy says, I guess Aptasia eating filefish with flower anemones is a no-no. I have no idea. I've never actually kept a filefish, so I haven't got any personal experience, but I've never heard that was a problem with flower anemones or rock anemones. But if you discover that, would you please let me know if it is a problem? It's almost like Stump Me Love this Saturday. Oh, that's awesome. So Timotel says, I think a lot of perceived failure is us being too hard on ourselves. So get an opinion from someone that's not in the hobby, and you'll be amazed at what they find successful in your tank. And I can tell you, like, for example, if I'm looking at my reef tank and, someone that delivers acrylic or someone is dropping off a package from UPS and they're looking at my tank and like, oh, those little things are really cool, and they're pointing to Aptasia, I just nod and say thank you. It's like, I'm just saying, I just grabbed an example out of the air. But a lot of times they will like the things that you're like, oh, I can't stand that this is in my tank. And that's the first thing the guest sees, and they don't know it's bad, and they think it's kind of cool. So yeah, it's funny how that works out. That's a great tip. Get someone that's not in the hobby to give you their opinion, and suddenly you'll love your reef again. I love that. Branson says, have you ever tried a sulfur reactor before? Nope, I never did. Toast says, I'm having diatom blooms. The glass gets covered every few hours. The tank is 6 months old. I'm using RODI with 0 TDS. It's an all SPS tank and growing awesome. Sometimes we'll get this thing where our glass just gets dirty every few hours, and it seems to be like this daily for weeks, and then it finally subsists or stops. I've lived through that before. I couldn't figure out what was going on. I just dealt with it. But yeah, it was a total pain in the butt because I had to keep swiping the glass. These days, I've been barely cleaning my glass at all in the tank. This video you're looking at right now was, I cleaned the glass 2 days before I shot this video. And it looked pretty good. By the way, I want to mention, a couple people saw this video in the stream previously and said, why did you put that hippo tang in there, and there's no room, and there's all those tentacles, and it's spending its life dodging them. And when I'm filming this or showing the tank at this point, that's when the tank is super fluffy. It's like worst case scenario. And for half the day, the tentacles are much smaller. All night, all that stuff is closed down. It's just during the feeding hours that things look really wide open and it looks like there's less space. The hippo will eventually move. I'm not sure how I'm going to catch her because she is ridiculously skittish. I can just walk past the tank and she darts into the rockwork. So last night I was being a little proactive. I did some sandbed vacuuming, which I do once in a blue moon on that tank because there's really nothing to clean the sand in that tank. And I sucked out a total of 20 gallons out of the 60-gallon cube by pumping in more water into my sump, and then I did the vacuuming into a bucket, and I filled the bucket 4 times with some disgusting brown water. And the hippo was like very unhappy with me, staying near her spot where she likes to duck into that coral that she calls home. And then 10 minutes later, when I was gone, she came back out and she was like, okay, tank's cloudy, but thanks for whatever the heck you did to my tank. But no, she really is not in distress. When that vet was here, she said there is absolutely nothing wrong with this tank. It is very healthy. There is no signs of scarring or stings or burns or anything to make me think this fish has discomfort. And when I got it, it was this big. It was itty bitty. It was an inch. So it's grown. It's time to move it out. I just have to get it out. And I'll probably have to build a special fish trap that fits that aquarium and catch her. And then I'll move her into the frag system where she has more room to swim and way less tentacles. So it'll happen. And then I got to figure out what I want to put in that tank instead because I enjoy having Dory swimming around in there. Do I get a Dory too? I don't know. I want to put something in there, but I need to find something that's compatible with that many tentacles besides the clownfish. Odile says, I'm looking to get a rimless 200-gallon. What's the best company to get that size tank from? There are quite a few tank builders out there. Planet Aquarium makes nice ones. Reef Savvy makes beautiful tanks. I think there's another one called like Tank Artisans or Artisanal Tanks or something like that. A lot of these companies do make the rimless tanks you're looking for. And it just comes down to how long it takes them to build it and how much it's going to cost you. Scott says, hello from Scotland. I moved houses recently. I moved my 60-gallon tank. The aquascape is being redone tomorrow. All the fish survived. I lost some soft corals. But where my toadstool mushroom was, there looks to be skin. You mean tissue left over that could grow another toadstool mushroom, maybe? It's possible if there's any kind of meat left behind, you might grow a new coral from it. I'm sorry to hear you lost a lot of your corals. I guess that move was really rough on the corals. But anytime you can find just a little bit of life, I call it, you know, well, usually I'm talking about SPS corals, and I call it SPS DNA. But if you have any bit of life, even a little bit of leather alive in your tank, it can grow into a full-on colony one day. Mina says, I got a sand sifting starfish, and I think it depleted all the beneficial life from my sand bed. Yes, that's exactly what it did. The sand bed just looks bad. Yup, I believe it. It actually it's a dead sand bed, and so a lot of nuisance stuff starts growing on it, and it gets worse and worse. If I remove the sand sifting starfish, can I re-add beneficial life to the sand? Yes, you can do that too. Yeah, get rid of that guy. He does not belong in a reef tank. Sand sifting starfish are good for fish-only systems, usually because the predator fish don't like eating them. So they are a good cleanup crew critter for that tank. But for a reef tank, they decimate the good bacteria. They are not like other starfish that are looking for some detritus or will eat the occasional bug or worm. The sand sifters eat everything until there's nothing. And you can Google it. You can look up the difference between that and other starfish and see what they eat, and you can see why it's such a bad choice. And if I'm ever in a fish store and I see a customer buying a sand sifter for a reef tank, I usually give the employee a bit of a talking down to. And then invariably, I mean, it's happened twice. I've been in a store and I said, are you putting that in a reef tank? And they're like, yeah. And then I look at the employee like, really? You're selling that to them for a reef tank? And then they're like, oh, you didn't say it was a reef tank. I'm sorry, I can't sell you this. I'm like, mm-hmm. So yeah, they don't belong in reef tanks. If you want anything in your sand bed, critter-wise, I like Nacerius snails. I like the sand conch, 1 per 2 square feet of sand. And then, yeah, what you could do at this point is you could add a bag of live sand to your system to reestablish the sand bed you have now. But that starfish has to go. Alfredo says, is there any breeding pair among the 11 clowns? They look like they're always squabbling. Yeah, I know. There's times where they just all have their spot and they're good, and then there's times where they're squabbling. And then, I mean, but I haven't seen any eggs. I've had them for like 4 years, and I look all over the place. I keep looking for a rock they're cleaning off, any kind of clue that something's happening. But I haven't noticed any egg laying yet. I don't know. I need to ask a breeder how old they need to be to where they finally start to lay clutches of eggs. Because, yeah, from time to time it'll occur to me, hey, maybe they've got a spot now. But I still haven't found one. Edwin says, have you set up your quarantine tank yet? Nope, not yet. Mr. Reefbuster says, could you go over benefits of live fish food versus frozen pellet food? Frozen food or pellet food? And how should we feed live food? And which live foods do you recommend? Wow, that's a lot. Okay, so I like to use frozen food every night. Oh, we got to pause for a second. Just look at the video in my empty chair. I'm going to go answer my door. All right, I'm back. And in a second here, we're going to grab my son to join in the chat for a second. So we'll switch to a regular microphone. So I found you this little spot here. You have to sit super close.
Thank you, thank you.
We'll see if you fit in the square.
Well, no, we'll see. I like the green screen.
Yeah, it's going to be really narrow. Here you go.
Oh, yeah.
Okay,
I think I can fit right there.
I was hoping so.
Yeah.
You're too high. You're too high. All right, hang on. Let me add you now.
up.
No, give me a second here. We've got tall. Nope, that doesn't work. So we will try classic.
Oh,
There you are. Okay, now we'll switch this over. Boom. Look at that.
Hey.
You can see the corner of the screen. Oh, no.
Yeah,
Yeah, keep your head there.
Yeah.
All right.
Let's see.
So we'll see what
Hold
happens
on.
here. Let's see if I can do this.
2 times.
Oh, no matter how I do it. See, it's
Oh,
only
if I
made
do
for
it the
one.
back.
It's not made
Yeah.
for two.
It's not, yeah, it's like, it's not happening.
All right, well, whatever.
So, yeah.
So this is my son, Philip.
Hello, everybody.
Didn't
I guess
bring-
I should talk right there. I'm looking at the screen.
Didn't
Okay.
bring me a grandson.
No, he's still COVID-free, so we're making
And-
sure he's at
And
home.
I should have worn my mask the whole time because you're
I know.
closer than 6 feet.
I know. I need to, like, back up immediately.
But then you're out of the
But-
green screen.
But I wash hands, and I'm clean as I can be.
Right.
So-
All right. Let's go down here and see what else needs to go on here. All right. So
if
anyway,
you-
let me
If you're
ask you.
Melev, then I'm Pelev, right?
Right. No, actually, I do want to ask you some questions on the stream
Okay.
here, but you got to wait till I answer some of these questions.
Oh, yes, go
We'll do
ahead.
that super chat.
Nice.
So, Mr. Reefbuster had asked before about going over live food versus frozen and pellet food. So, frozen and pellet food is beneficial to your tank because it can create instant food. You can just put it in the tank right then and there. There's no waiting. If it's frozen, I always like to thaw it out and then release it into the tank where it disperses all over the place for the fish to eat. And live foods would be like phytoplankton, worms, pods. Typically that's going to be more expensive because, or even if you're buying like clams or something, you're going to put in the tank for a fish to rip open and devour. Or if you have a predator tank and you're going to have crabs that are alive, you drop in and the predator kills it and rips it open. Or you have a mantis that smashes a snail to eat the meat inside. That's, like I said, that's going to be way more expensive than pellet food or flake food. So I don't use a lot of live foods in my system. I usually deal with frozen and pellet and flake. All right, let me do another one. And then eventually we'll see where we are on the chat. We are way up here,
nice.
so it's going to be a while to get to you, but I won't make you wait forever. I'm not going to make you sit for 3 hours.
I'm learning.
Of this.
I'm learning at the same time as these awesome reefers are learning.
You get to see what it looks like from the back end.
Yeah, I know.
It's crazy, right?
Behind the scenes.
Yeah. All right. Jamie says, do you need a special solution to calibrate a refractometer, or can you do it with RO water, and how often should you calibrate? You should use 35 ppt calibration solution. I sell something in my shop called Accuracy, which I love. Such a good name for that. And you put it on the refractometer and you set it to 35 because that's near the range we're going to measure anyway. And if you were to set it to 0 with RO water, you're actually way off the scale. And it's not accurate. It's the worst way to calibrate is with RO water. And unfortunately, a lot of people do that. And that's not recommended by almost every brand. There's like 1 or 2 brands that actually tells you in the instructions, use RO water. None of the rest do. So I do recommend using 35 ppt solution. You can find it on my website, Accuracy, or you can, just go to Amazon and get it from somebody else. Dave says, which bacteria starter do you recommend? I want to be able to transfer livestock from the current tank to a tank upgrade without waiting for a cycle. If you're doing a transfer of everything, you're moving the rock, the sand, the fish, the corals, you don't have to do anything at all. There will not be a cycle as long as the rock isn't exposed to air. So if you take the rock out of the tank and you immediately move it into a trash can and you cover it with salt water, and then you set up the new tank in its place and you pull the rock out of that barrel of water and put it in the tank and add the salt water on top again so it stays wet, cycle doesn't happen. But if you are trying to set up, like you have a tank, you're setting it up, and now you want to throw livestock on top of it, you're putting your livestock at risk because the tank has not cycled yet. And in that situation, you want the tank to go through its cycle for a few weeks. And now that you've established everything's running smoothly, everything's working correctly, now you can move the livestock in and it'll be safe. But no, there's not some kind of magic bacteria I'd recommend you pour in the tank and now you can add livestock and you're going to avoid a cycle. That's not how it's done. So tank transfers, if you need more information on that, please come back to me and we'll discuss it in detail. but it's kind of a huge topic, and it would take a long time to answer it in this chat. Odile, thank you very much for the super chat. I appreciate that. And yeah, I like the background too. I think it's pretty cool.
Nice.
Let's see. Alternate energy. I feel like there's a typo in there, but maybe it's written like that on purpose. You said, are you familiar with PNS ProBio and PNS Yellow Snow? I am not. And what will it do to my nitrate and phosphate? I don't know. Fish Stuff says, is your Pavona brown and will it turn green again? All of mine is green. I don't have any brown Pavona in my tank, but if you ever have one that turns brown, it can get its green color back when things are back in the tank. Joe says, all my acans are closed up. Any reason why? Just out of the blue. It could be that some kind of sudden change in parameter has affected them, or it could be a fish is nipping at them. Or it could be they're just being pissy today and they're going to be okay tomorrow. I mean, that does happen too. But odds are something is irritating them. I would wait till tonight when it's dark, turn off all the lights in the room, leave the light on in the tank, stand way back, and watch and see what your livestock is doing and see if anyone's going near those acans.
See if they're pecking them or something?
Yes. Nirayan says, can running a wooden air stone in your sump increase your pH? I just got an Apex and want to learn how the tank works and how it can improve stability. Okay, so no, don't run an air stone in your sump. There's no benefit. If you wanted an air stone, if you really wanted one, you'd put it in the display tank. But nobody does that. That's not what you do in a reef tank. We want the water to be clear. We don't want it filled up with bubbles. The best way to raise pH in a tank is basically to maintain the correct alkaline, calcium, magnesium, salinity, temperature. If you do that, then pH takes care of itself. But some people have found the benefit of using fresh air from outside, and so they would run a tube from outside through their attic and into the area by the tank and hook it up to the protein skimmer, so the protein skimmer is not sucking in air from the house, it's sucking in air from outside. And that has helped raise pH a little bit. I would suggest that you read my article on water quality today and bookmark it and then read it again in a week because there's a lot of information in that article and it's more than you can just absorb in one sitting, in my opinion. I feel like there's a ton of data there. And if you'll read that, I think it'll help you a lot with what you're wanting to know. Tam says, what is all the stuff in the lower layers of your sand bed? Do you still plan to replace or add to your sand? There's all kinds of goofy stuff growing down there. I need to clean that area, which means I have to get my arm wet. And I do want to add more sand where it's low to replace what's basically evaporated over the last couple of years.
I remember you used to clean your sand all the time.
Yeah.
And then at one point you were like, I'm just going to kind of let it do its own thing. Mm-hmm. And it did. And it seems to be healthy that way too, if you just don't mess with it too much.
Yeah. No, I appreciate having less work. It's always better. Yeah. And Calypso says, I'm experiencing alkalinity drop back to back. I bring it up to 8.3. 2 days later, it's down to 7.4. What can it be? I recently changed my Fosguard to Pura Foslock. Pura Foslock is literally a phosphate remover. That one I remember. Fosguard is different. It's a totally different deal. But your alkalinity dropping 2 days later is because you're not dosing it every single day. So you need to be dosing alkalinity every single day to maintain a certain number, like 8.3. And I hope we're talking about, I'm not sure, wait. Yeah, you said alkalinity, because the numbers almost sound like pH. If your alkalinity is normally 8.3, you have to keep dosing to stay at 8.3. You want to be 8.3 around the clock every single day. That would be the ideal. The realistic thing is it'll be 8.3, and then it'll go down to 8.0, and then you bring it up to 8.4, and then it's 7.9, somewhere in there. But going from 8.3 to 7.4, that's 1 DKH difference. That's quite a swing, and we want to limit those swings to like half a DKH. So dosing daily would definitely help a lot. See, this is why I can never stop these streams, Philip. There's so many questions.
There's a lot of knowledge going around, though.
Yeah. Callie says, I noticed that you feed right before lights go off. Is there a reason behind that? Or do you just happen to feed them? No, I feed them at the same time every single day. Some people want to feed during the middle of the day. I like to feed my babies before they go to bed. And I've been doing that like this forever. I don't even remember the last time I didn't feed
Rod's
at like
food, right?
9:30.
That's it?
Yeah. Yeah, I feed at 9:30, 10. I mean, it's usually 10:30 at night, and I do that every single night. And I've been doing it forever.
On a schedule.
Plus, during the daytime, they may get some nori or a piece of banana, or the auto feeder will drop in something earlier in the day. So they had a couple of snacks already.
It's probably Spock's favorite time when he sees that banana.
I actually just bought some. I posted a picture of the supermarket because no one was there on Facebook.
Yeah, I saw that on Facebook.
And somebody said, "Did you buy any bananas for Spock?"
You have to. You have to go straight to the bananas.
I know, right? So Meldium says, on your Facebook group 2 weeks ago, you were giving me tips on photography and RAW and the editing. Have you done a live stream about let's talk about photography and Coral? I've done a couple of videos specifically dealing with editing and showing my desktop, where I used, I did one, it's an article, it's about Photoshop, super old. And then I did one about Lightroom, which is way more current. And those two were good. I've done some streams about taking pictures with iPhones, and but there's always room for another stream. And so there would be a time where I see it coming. Matter of fact, I'm supposed to be doing Reef Dude's live stream on May 20th, which is a Wednesday. And we're going to be talking about photographing and editing on our iPhones, because we both use iPhones. So that's something for you to look forward to.
I'll probably be tuning in on that one. Learn a little bit more.
That'll work. You're an iPhone user.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
I made you.
Yeah, you made me into
I literally
Apple.
made you, and then I made you.
I told Jessica, my wife, I said, what if I do an Android this time around? And she said she'd literally divorce me. She said, this is an Apple household. How dare you?
We're done.
I was like, okay, so I guess I can't make the plunge.
You don't want to.
I guess I'm stuck.
You really don't. Everyone's going to tell you, oh, yeah, switch. No, you don't. And
It's
then
like,
you will,
right?
and you'll come back.
Well, it's like a religion if I go one way or the other. It's just like, you can't. It's blasphemy.
I know. Yeah.
So.
It's awful. The Grim Reaper says, my Montipora digitale is turning white. Is this known as STN? Any ideas? Best way of trying to save the rest? The alkaline had a quick drop from 6 to 9. I feel like it's the opposite. It dropped from 9 to 6, but it's sorted out, and it's a new dosing pump. Yeah, when you have those kind of things happen in your tank and you lose a coral, all you can do is kind of hope and pray that what's left hangs in there long enough to start regrowing. If you were to jump in there and handle it immediately, you might just kill off what's left, because it's already stressed, and now you're grabbing it, you're gluing it, you're cutting it, you're moving it. So I try to just leave it be. But yeah, that huge swing would definitely be the reason you had that sudden turning of the white of the coral. Did you see me walk by?
I did. I was like,
it's cool, huh?
I was like, oh my gosh, it's
Inception.
a ghost. Somebody's over there.
It was me.
Inception.
Tattooed Dancer says, do you have any luck growing Acupora spatulata with nice colors? It's the only acro that I've been unsatisfied with for some reason. I don't think I've ever had that one. So now I probably need it. Thank you. Thank you, Eric. So he says, actually, a mother blamed a dingo on the death of her kid, and she was lying. Okay, so the dingo didn't eat her baby.
I always knew it.
Do you remember that line from Seinfeld?
Yeah, that was iconic when that
someone was here on the stream earlier that said they're from Australia, and they were feeding the baby, and I just said, well, watch out for the dingo, And I was like, they probably have no idea what I'm talking about.
They're probably like, what? This makes zero sense. We don't watch Seinfeld.
Well, they probably get Seinfeld over there. Isaac says, why did you give up on using biopellets? I'm currently struggling to keep my nitrates down as I feed my fish and corals. I started using biopellets again today. I did it for a while, and it was okay. And I did it for like 3 years or so. I just wanted to try something different. I like to try out different products and see what they do. And if I can't keep everything running at the same time, if I want to see what biopellets do, I have to run that. And if I want to see how vodka dosing works, I have to stop the pellets and see what vodka dosing does. You can't put vodka dosing on top of biopellets, on top of a turf scrubber, on top of a refugium, on top of a skimmer. It's just too many things. So you choose a tool and you go with that. And so, yeah, I switched.
Almost like, would it be like over-filtering in a way if you're just using so many different items?
Yeah.
It has no chance to grow any type of...
It just causes chaos.
Yeah.
You end up with all kinds of weird effects, and you're like, you can't even isolate the problem because there's too many moving parts.
Too many tools for one job.
You have to pick the right one.
Makes sense.
Here's another one. So if I Google the death of Azaria Chamberlain, I'll find out about the dingo ate my baby story. See, there is a whole thing.
Wow.
Why did I never Google this before? Look at all the dingo comments.
I don't think we went
dingo,
too far into that. We're gonna need to like actually research a lot of
There's
this
so
now.
many comments. And the thing is, I talked about 20 minutes ago. I'm always so far behind on the chat. It's ridiculous. Let's see. Rob, love the name so much, he named himself twice. Said, can nitrates at 0 and phosphates at 0.03 cause an algae problem because they are out of balance? You don't want 0, 0. And I know you're not 0, 0. You're 0 and 0.03, which is really low. You need a little bit of nitrate in that tank. Can it cause problems? Maybe not. Possibly yes. You need a little bit of nitrate. Your corals need a little bit of nitrate. There's nothing bad about nitrate. So you're going to need to put a little bit of stuff in your tank, find something that you can use as an additive that increases nitrate. Watch really closely. Don't let it shoot up. If you're dosing and it's like 1 and 1 and 1, and then suddenly it's 50, you're going to have problems with your corals. They're going to respond really badly to that sudden change. So you have to stay on top of it if you are dosing any. But if your tank is doing well right now, be glad. And just keep an eye on things. And maybe it's just going to take care of itself over time and you'll start to see the nitrate happen. All right, I'm going to stop answering questions here for the moment because we'll never get caught up. And I want to ask you questions.
Uh-oh.
So
all right, I'm ready.
They need to know, what was it like growing up in a house with a guy that has a saltwater tank and thought it was the most important thing in his life and how you always came second?
Let's see here. I'm going to talk to my therapist after this interview. So, no, I mean, at first it felt like it was just a small thing. I mean, you started out with a 29 gallon.
Yeah.
Which you actually built the actual stand that held the 29 gallon. I remember you painted it and glossed it and everything, and it had like a shelf on top. And it was cool. It was just kind of off in the distance. But then it was kind of like that addiction that you're like, I think I need a bigger tank. I think I'm going to need a bigger tank.
Right.
And then we went to, I think you had the 75 long, 75 gallon?
55.
Or 55, yes. And that one was a little bit bigger. And But, I mean, you were gradually, I think, adapting to like your new hobby, and it was just growing. So in a way, it was really cool because I got to see and learn a lot from you, how you took care of, I mean, they're animals. I mean, it's an amazing thing.
No, he's being really polite. He really did hate the tank. He did. He hated it. He
I don't want to discourage any reefers.
No, this is reality. He hated it so much, and he'd throw it in my face. Oh, it's always about the tank. The tank comes first. Oh, no, there's another phone call about the tank.
I was like a teenager. I was probably kind of a douche at the time. So I probably just wanted me.
I'll tell you, it's true. That did happen. I just ignored it because parents have to ignore what their kids say because kids are mean. But
yes. Oh, believe me. Yeah. No will tell me anything. There's no filter on no.
You're going to be thinking, oh, man, it's not fair. But the funny thing is when Philip would have his friends come over, they all came in all sweaty and disgusting from skateboarding. And it'd smell up the whole living room. And they're standing in front. And the kids were like, this tank is amazing.
Oh, yeah.
And Philip would give them a tour and tell them what everything was. He'd say, that's an aptasia, and you don't want those in your tank. My dad's going to kill that.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah, I remember we'd have times where you were like, hey, we need to start just killing every aptasia. So you'd get the little needle ready, and we'd just start stabbing them all. Yeah, I remember that. That was fun, though. I mean, it's one of those things that, like, I was so desensitized by it because I knew so much about it being around you. Mm-hmm. But everybody that I brought to the house was like, oh my God, what is this? Like, what is this? Is this like, and I would just have to tell them because I thought it was cool that other people didn't understand it. Yeah. That it was just kind of foreign to them. To me, it was like, it's another tank. Yeah, it'll be fine. It's going to sit over there. Yeah. It's good. It's good. I'll just talk to my dad later when he's done doing the water change. So
I dragged you to a few club meetings.
Yeah.
What did you think of those? Did you hate them?
They were kind of small at first though because like that was whenever you were starting to get into it, and I think that now they're humongous. I mean, now they're really cool because they're events. Mm-hmm. Then it was just kind of like a city hall meeting. It was just small, it was compact. But I probably didn't have as much fun as you did at them, but I definitely feel like it was fun though. I mean, it was cool to learn.
I remember at one of them specifically because you liked the raffle. Yeah. And I remember at one of them you won a fish. Yeah. And I did not want a fish. And he's like, look, Dad, we want a fish. And I'm like,
another one.
Because now we have to acclimate. We have to dip it for parasites.
Right, exactly. It became a chore every time you added a new fish. But, I think one of the things I always thought was interesting is that now I remember you had so much trouble with the like the yellow tangs when I was younger. Like that was like the fish that you're like, I'll never buy that fish because it'll die every time. Yeah. And I think it's cool because now you've gotten it to where those tangs are just healthy.
Yeah,
and they're awesome now. I mean, you've had them such a long time. So I think it is neat in retrospect. Yes, at the time I was probably like, okay, it's a bunch of fish and some water. But I definitely thought it was amazing. I think now looking back at it, because I've seen what you've grown it into, and now it's like a craft. Yeah. I mean, it's now something different. So, but no, the fish were super healthy. But I remember you had a lot of trial and error. And I think that's cool that what these streams do is that they help people like in other reefers who do trial and error because there's so much going on below the tank versus what you see when you look at the tank. Yeah. Like it's just so much more. Yeah. So I think that's cool. Yeah. Yeah. It's pretty awesome.
Now you had a tank in your bedroom for a while.
Man, that was a long time ago. That was what was the size of that?
29.
Okay, yeah, it was 20. Okay, yeah, that was small. But what did we put in there?
You had the maroon clownfish.
Okay, yes, maroon. Okay.
And you loved feeding that tank.
Way back.
You loved feeding that tank. Yeah. So he had a jar of Formula One pellets, and he was supposed to put in some pellets every day, and apparently he fed the fish every 12 minutes forever. Because the skimmer on the back was pulling out red liquid, and I was like, "How is this red?" It made no sense at all.
Overfeeding,
baby. And you're like, "Hey, Dad, I need another jar of food." I'm like, "Oh, okay." So I gave him Formula 2, which is green, and that's the herbivore mix, and he would feed the heck out of that to the tank. Right. And then the skimmer was pulling out green. I mean, it was like glowing blue. It looked like antifreeze, and I was like, "What is this?"
I was just trying to get my fish to get buff. I wanted them to get strong.
That's why that maroon got so big. She was like this big. No,
it was so bad for those fish.
It was crazy. Now. You fed the heck out of those fish. And then you remember we had an eel in that tank for a little while.
Yes, yeah. I remember. That was probably the coolest thing because, I mean, that was the closest thing to having like a pet snake. Yeah. I mean, it was, who doesn't want a pet snake? I mean, maybe some people don't, but
I don't want a pet snake.
I think it's still kind of cool. Yeah. I mean, yeah.
Remember the time it jumped out?
Yes, but it... Oh my gosh, I think that was... But then that when it died?
Yeah, you killed it. No, I'm kidding.
I didn't do that.
I'm kidding. You didn't kill it.
I would never do that to an eel. No, that eel, I don't know why that happened.
Well, it did jump out. And Philip was screaming my name from across the room. Well, not my name. He's like, Dad, Dad, Dad. And I'm like, what? And he's like, the eel came out of the tank, and it's under the dresser. Yes. And it was completely under there. And we were trying to get it out, which was not an easy task. And when I finally was able to retrieve it, which I don't remember what I did to do that, maybe a yardstick or something.
Something to kind of go from behind to pull it towards us.
It was covered in dog hair. There was like 10,000 pounds of Jake's fur under that dresser. So this yellow eel was completely matted in black hair. And I thought, well, I can't just put it back in the tank covered in dog hair. It'll kill the reef with all, there's no way the rest of the tank could live with all that dog hair.
Oh yeah, I mean there's no way. I mean, and I think that the eel it was just too far gone. Yeah, that was really sad. I mean, I think losing an animal is it's sad in general, but then it's these are sometimes people think of them as just fish, but they're animals.
They are pets.
Yeah. They are. I mean, you're taking care of them, you're nurturing them, and you're feeding them, and yeah, it's a cool thing. I mean, whenever you get to the point where you can do it,
Mm-hmm. So what we did with that eel to try and save it, but it didn't work. I took it to the sink and I tried to make the tap water come out at the same temperature as what felt like tank water to me because it was all impulse and rushing around. Yeah. And I was trying to basically rinse off and pull the hair off this eel and then put it back in the tank. But when I put it back in the tank, of course, it kind of went to the bottom and seemed like it was gasping, and I thought it'd be all right. And
that was it.
I think that evening it was just gone.
Yeah.
It was too much. I probably handled it wrong. I didn't know what to do.
It was nice having the eel though. That was fun. It was a beautiful, beautiful animal.
Yeah, bright yellow.
But I mean, sometimes fish do that though. I mean, you've had a couple over the years where a fish you're walking around the tank checking it out, and the fish is just there on the floor. You're like, what happened? Yeah. Or the time you had some clown inside the. Or you still have clowns down in the sump, don't you? Not anymore. Back in the tank. Oh, okay. But I remember we had one there for a little bit because it had gone down there and you just kind of made its own world. Yeah. That's kind of cool. I mean.
Yeah, I found one clownfish once in the sump of my 55-gallon aquarium under the refugium. So I had this floating refugium in the sump, and then I had a mag pump that would suck the water in, and I put like a strainer on the end of the mag pump under the refugium so it would draw water from under there so there was no stagnant zone. And then one day when I was really cleaning, I looked under the refugium and I saw the clownfish like living around the strainer. Like that's the safe spot, which is the worst place to be. Yep. And I was able to retrieve it and put it back in the tank. And I thought that thing had died like 3 months before, like just evaporated. and it was alive and well down in the sump.
Yeah.
And I think we named him after one of the characters from Survivor. You know, like whoever won that season of Survivor, like Jim.
I wonder.
And so we named that
the
clwnfish
first one or something.
Yeah,
like
or Richard.
Richard.
Or
I know. I was just thinking Richard.
Right. I think we named him Richard
that was
because
the first one that like
he was Survivor.
he was the smartest one.
Right?
I think he gave the money away, didn't he? Like he let
He
that
did,
other guy win.
Yeah.
See, that's a mastermind move.
And then the other guy that did win the money, didn't pay the taxes on it, got in trouble. Then he showed up on Survivor later naked.
That's probably one of the
best
the
good old days.
That was the best season though. All the other 29,000 seasons, like, that was
the good old days. Oh man, I can't even watch Survivor anymore. All right,
yeah, it's different.
So what else can I ask you? Oh yeah, I have a good question for you. So my biggest question, and I know you got to get going quick because you have a long drive back.
Oh yeah, no problem.
Do you think you will ever get a saltwater tank in your own home?
Yes, but I think it'll happen whenever Noah is a little bit older. Because I feel like it'll be something that, now he just loves to look at them in general, but I would like to teach him something like that. And plus, when he's a little bit older, we can kind of bounce ideas off each other, and I think that'll be really cool. Mm-hmm. Because he's a sponge right now. He literally is. And I think that'll be neat to show him stuff like that. Now, 400 gallons, probably not going to happen. Probably not.
You just want that in the will, right?
But, yeah, exactly, yeah. Just sign it off for me. Yeah, so I think it would probably start with something small, like even like the 55-gallon. Just something to have maybe some corals and maybe a couple of clownfish because he loves Finding Nemo. Yeah, yeah. But something like that would be fun.
A clownfish, a little clownfish with a bad fin and a hippo?
Yes, exactly. Hippo tank. But I think that I would definitely do that one day. But it really is a lot involved, so it takes so much time and so much care that it would have to be a time when he's older because right now he takes all the time and care that I need.
Right. Yeah.
But I know that people do it even with kids, and that's amazing to me. But I think eventually I would though.
So if you ever do it, how are you going to know who to ask for information? Are you just going to watch 10 years of streams?
I'm just going to have to go to YouTube, type in me love, and look at all the hours of video and all this.
So I was like, there's like 10,000 hours you have to watch.
Yeah.
Like, okay, now I'm ready.
Yeah.
I should have just asked my dad.
No, but I think that there's a lot for me still to learn. And these streams are awesome for people like that too. But yeah, definitely, I would probably come to you, of course, to set it up.
Yeah, I was kidding.
It'll be fun though. I think whenever I set it up, you're gonna be way happier than I am because you're just gonna be like, it finally happened. He made a tank. He's got one.
Or it's going to be, God, he's calling me again. What is wrong now?
That's true. I'm probably going to have to blow up your phone quite a bit. Just, hey, another question about this alkalinity.
It'll be the exact same question I've been answering the stream for 3 years.
You're going to be like, go to my streams. Leave me alone. But I'll be like, okay, I'll go to your streams.
I'm like, you can buy what you need from my shop.
Yeah. No, I thought I got a discount. I don't get a discount, everybody. Just so you know, I get zero
No
discount.
Nepotism in this house.
Yeah, he's very good at that. So
hey, I'm an only child.
So I'll just go grab some stuff from the back, and I'll just run out the front door.
Now that you could probably pull off.
Yeah.
It's like, wait, was that a vortex?
You're like, no, it's just it says Apex or something. Like, I don't know. I'm taking it with me though.
That'd be great.
I think one of my scariest memories of the tank life was when he had just built a beautiful sump. And he had what was weights on it to keep everything, all the glue to cure. I came in with my friends, sweaty, skateboarding, having fun. We brought in a bunch of dudes here, and I remember I think it was myself
or you.
It was me, yeah. And I barely tipped one of the weights, and it just slid right off the corner of the sump and straight into the bottom, cracked it. I remember that was. I thought I was gonna die. I thought that was it for me.
I was so mad at him. Oh my god!
Yeah.
I made all his sweaty friends leave, and then I yelled at him. And then
it
I
was
made
a very scary event.
I made you tape off every single panel in that thing,
yes,
so we could route off the bottom entirely,
yes, and make a new bottom,
and glue a new bottom on it. And the customer had to wait more days while we were fixing.
Why don't we
just
say it was a learning exercise?
Oh, it was learning you. You learned a lot.
Yes,
you did. Yeah, that was a bad one because he brought in all these people, and I had, like always, the sump's in the middle of the living room. And
perfect place for it, too, just so you know.
That's where you work, But
yes.
I had all the weights on the four corners. These are the kind of weights you'd put on a barbell. And so I had them in the four corners to weigh it down, and they kept getting up and getting down, and I was nervous. Like, you're too close to my sump. And he's like, it's fine, Dad, it's fine. We got this. We know. We're going to be careful. And then he looked, I got to use the restroom. And he jumped up and just binged it on. And when that thing cracked the sump,
I remember
his friend's eyes got so big, and he was just like,
Yeah,
and that crack was like that long.
They knew nothing about what you did, and I think even that sound of that thing cracking, they were just like, so do we all leave? Do we run? Or what do you want us to do, Philip? I was like, run.
Yeah.
So take me with you.
Yeah, no. You stayed behind. We spent a couple of days fixing that sump all together.
But, you know, and the thing is, though, I think making the sumps is so much fun because, no, I mean, seriously, no, I'm going to.
Come do them!
Yeah, exactly. Maybe not in mass quantity. I think back then when you first started, you were making, you know, just some small custom orders. And that was cool, though, because we were cutting the sheets on the table saw, which was not easy.
Nope.
Doing the gluing with you, making, you know, like the camera boxes and stuff like that, little small stuff when you first started.
Yeah.
That was cool to me because, you know, I love building too.
Yeah. And,
you know, you're way better at math, but I still love, like, just the
They don't believe that.
Yeah.
I'm bad at math on live streams.
No, he is. Like, you should see his notes, like, on notepads. Like, he'll be putting stuff down. I'm like, this is Einstein stuff. Like, how did you... On paper, you're perfect at it. I think maybe on the fly, you're like me.
Yeah, I hate it on the fly.
Yeah.
It's like, God, don't ask me math on the camera.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but no, I think that there were some awesome memories over the years for good and bad.
That's pretty good. He remembered a lot of good ones. I'm surprised.
Yes.
I didn't remember all the good ones. I remember the bad ones.
I gotta push you out there in a good way. I can't make you the bad guy.
I think you need to defend
yourself. So just go to YouTube, type in Philip Levinson, and I'll tell you everything bad about him on my stream.
There you go.
No, but no, this is really cool. I'm so proud of you, what you do, and for all these amazing people too on the stream and anybody that's wanting to learn. So
you're talking to 302 people right now.
Wow, I feel so
no
famous.
pressure, right?
No pressure at all.
Yeah.
So I hope everybody's being safe. I hope everybody and their families are healthy. I know that right now it's just nuts, and I know that the state of Texas is opening up. So I just hope everybody's just being smart and. Yeah, and I hope everybody's happy and healthy.
Yeah,
so
same thing.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for coming on the stream.
I know.
I'm gonna show you out to the door, and then I'll come right back to you guys.
Bye, everybody. I hope you have a great Saturday.
And I'll answer the rest of your questions. I'll be right back.
Bye. All right. That was fun.
Now they can't hear us.
Yes, they can. Okay, that was fun. You have to let me know if this is working again. I only walked away for a few minutes. So That was fun being able to talk with someone else here locally on the stream because we never do that. It's always me talking. And the people that made this software have made the announcement that they are going to build into the software the ability to bring in someone else. So, a lot of streams bring in a guest. And so in a couple of months, that should become available, and then I'll be able to try it out, and we'll see how that goes. That'll be a fun thing to do. All right. The ability to... Yeah, so, I'm sorry, my brain's a little bit all over the place. Having that chance to bring in other people for a stream would be really fun because the dynamic of a conversation is so much nicer than one onto the camera. But we've been doing this so long, we're probably used to it. I've had, like I said, a couple people were saying how they preferred when I just stood in front of the tank, even though I thought like the tank looked like garbage. And they said, no, I like that better than this. I think this is awesome, being able to see the reef and see the colors. So, all right. Let me scroll back and see where I left off on the questions so I can start tackling these. Wow, there's so many in chat today. Wow. Okay, so I found this, I scrolled way up. Insane Reefer says, I have 2 Generation 2 XR30s, which are radions, that stopped communicating with the reef link, so it got stuck to a lower intensity. Yeah, you may need to contact Ecotech for some tech support on that one to get some help. And that way you can get those running again. I had a Gen 2 that recently died, and it's, so I haven't had to keep it connected. But I have a Gen 3 and a Gen 4 connected, and I've got a Gen 5 that will be here probably the next week or two. They'll be hooking up as well. Adam says, what tanks do you recommend in a 90 to 120 gallon range? Thanks, I used to have an Oceanic 15 years ago. Yeah, Oceanic was the tank to get back in the day. So these days, for a 90 to a 120, I don't know. I mean, it seems like everyone wants Planet aquariums. That seems to be the go-to. Elos for a while there was making some really nice glass tanks. Glass boxes, or no, glass box. I think I've got that name right. It sounds weird when I said it out loud, but glass boxes is another one that a lot of people like to buy. They're very pretty. So you've got a few choices, and then of course there's the more high-end ones that are custom made. But those are a few that come to mind. Aqueon still makes larger tanks as well, so you have that choice. Coral Lover says, I love your anemones tank. I have a BioCube 32 over a year. I added about 10 different anemones, and slowly all of them are dead. Only one lives. Do you know why and what I can do? Were they all different types of anemones? So you basically combined a lot of different species into one box of water? Because if that's the case through allelopathy, which is a chemical warfare that you can't see with your eyes, it could be that it was, sort of like Highlander. Only one can survive in the end. And I think that may be the situation that you encountered there. If you only had bubble tips in there, you could probably enjoy having 10 in there, as long as they didn't get sucked into a pump. But if you were mixing like rock anemones and maxi minis and a carpet and a tube anemone and a sea bay and a long tentacle anemone and a rose bubble tip, I see so many different ones. They don't do well, especially in a small body of water. My 60-gallon cube that you like so much was all bubble tips, and I put in that one sea bay that was sold to me as a weird looking bubble tip. So I bought it because it was a bubble tip. And then it was shrinking away and doing really poorly. I moved it into my 400-gallon reef, which is basically a different tank, and that is the giant anemone that you see right here in this video, right there. That's the same one that was shriveling away in my anemone cube years ago. So you're asking, what can I do? I would, well, figure out if there's anything weird toxin-wise, but odds are it was weird combinations of other species. Stick to one type, make it a species-only tank, and just get that kind of anemone and just fill up the tank with those. That would be my choice, or my recommendation. That was fun being able to point something in the tank. Wish I could do that all the time. Yeah, did that. Ooh. Alfredo says the perfect fish for bubble tip anemones are Bengai cardinalfish. They get along very well with clowns and are immune to the stings, even as adults. You're right, that one and the three-spotted damsel, which nobody likes, they're kind of cool, and I've seen those stay inside anemones too. That's a great idea, and that would be a change of what I'm seeing all the time. Thank you! I'm going to totally do that at some point when I get the hippo out of there. Let's see. I'm just looking for the next question. There's a lot of conversation in here. Macy's daddy says, I love your anemone tank. Any idea of the par level over the tank? If not, can you describe the light? That's a Radeon Gen 4 that I've got over that tank. I'm using Reef Bright XHOs for the last 8 weeks maybe. So that was a new perk. Par, I'd have to look it up. I don't even know by heart. I think one corner of the tank measured 160, like one corner at the bottom measured 160 while another corner was like 80, which was kind of weird. And then the middle of the tank was more around 160. I'm barely guessing these. I mean, these are so long ago. I just need to remeasure and get some fresh numbers. It's 2020. I need some new measurements. Kurt Stoger says, how many 3 to 5 inch fish could I put in a 120? This sounds like a question about sardines. A 120 is a 4 foot long tank that's 2 feet by 2 feet. And I would probably not have more than 3 that size. I mean, I'd like to encourage you guys to get lots of little fish instead of big ones. Because big ones dominate the tank, they act like sharks or whales, and all the other fish duck into the rockwork and kind of hide because of these huge fish that are swimming back and forth. And it's a lot less social. So when you have lots of little ones, there's all this activity, and it seems more peaceful. And to have 1 or 2 big fish in the tank and everything else is medium and small is a really nice look. But when you end up with a lot of big behemoth fish in the tank, then you never see the little guys, and it's kind of a bummer. I mean, even the anemone cube that you were looking at, you saw a million tentacles. You didn't see 12 clownfish. They're just not in plain sight. And there's not even a behemoth in there to keep them away. So I would suggest 2 or 3. And of course, you have to choose what you like. And then hopefully, they all get along well. Skillmaster asked a question, not to me, he asked it to everyone else. I just found some brownish splotches moving on my torch's tentacles. What is that? You might be looking at flatworms that are walking across the skin of the coral, possibly, since it's moving. Or it could be possibly something worse, like brown jelly disease or dinoflagellates. So you'd have to be more specific what these splotches really look like. And if you want, you can post pictures in Club Milo's Reef. Mike Evans says, which rabbitfish is the best turf eater? And I would say all of them do well at eating turf algae. The yellow one is pretty common. And I really like I think it's called the elegant foxface. It's a much prettier fish by comparison. If I were to get one, I'd go that direction. And then there's the scribbled rabbitfish that's really nice looking too. Jamie says you should have a special guest every month, as a monthly thing after this lockdown. Yeah, that was fun. I really would like. I know people like to do this stuff through Zoom and bring people in through a little window and talk to a window kind of a deal. And yeah, it's convenient, but I really relish having a second person next to me to talk with and to pull on camera. So that would be my ultimate goal, would be grab locals here and get them on the show. That would be fun. Shaben says, do you have any tips on keeping a rose bubble tip anemone in a nano tank, 10 gallons? I would highly recommend you not do that because the tank is so small. It's so small. And the rose bubble tip becomes large. And unless you are going to have a 10-gallon tank with one anemone in the middle and a couple of clownfish, it's really going to be hard to maintain that one. There's just the lack of space. I had one anemone in my 29-gallon, and the thing ended up taking about half the tank. So I would definitely not recommend it for a 10. It's just too small a tank. Maybe Maxi Mini carpet anemones would be good for you. Focus on acan corals. Things that are small, grow slowly, are very colorful. That would be a nicer choice. But I wouldn't recommend a bubble tip in a tank that small. I know it can be done, but I don't think it's a great idea. Let's see. Scott Morrison wrote on here, does your son have a reef? Quick, if he says no, punch him and throw him out forever. It's funny. Mr. Reef Buster says he should grow facial hair like Phil. I have never grown a beard. The furthest I've ever gone was 5 days and I couldn't stand it. Let's see. And LXX says, I think feeding before lights out is good for corals too, especially the non-photosynthetic, the scolies, the lobos, and stuff like that. You're absolutely right. Because by feeding all the fish right before lights out, it triggers a response for the corals to open up, the fish are eating, the fish are pooping, and then it lands on the corals as the lights are going into darkness. The fish are going to eat everything they can find in the water, and then the corals will get what's left. But that's just how I do it. Donald, thank you very much for placing that order with me. Yep, I think I emailed you asking if the standard size was okay, and you said yes. And it'd be great to get rid of that 5-gallon bucket, I agree. Marine Life says, have you ever tried Tropic Marins all for reef? I have not, so I don't have an opinion. SF Website Design says, I have a wave maker question, but it's more complicated. I made a video, not sure when you can take a look at the video after the stream, not sure where to send the video link. You can send the link to me at sales@milasreef.com, and I'll check out your video. Chad says, I know you have a reactor. He's talking about the calcium reactor. But how much 2-part do you think you would use? Oh, I have no idea how much I would use. I've never done it. So I have no idea. Seriously. Though the benefit of using a calcium reactor for bigger tanks is why people, okay, so people used to use kalkwasser only in their top-off to maintain alkaline calcium in their tank, and they tried to keep up, and it kind of worked, and there was a lot of people that lost their coral reefs to accidents of overdosing kalkwasser. I never did that. And then Randy Holmes Farley came out with a 2-part recipe where you can make your own 2-part and mix it up and dose it to your tank. And at that point, when he was coming out with that kind of stuff, I was already using Bionic, which was a liquid, and it was super easy to use. And I was dosing my 29-gallon and my 55-gallon. When I got my 280-gallon, it came with a calcium reactor right from the very beginning. So I never used 2-part on the big tank. And I went from the 280 to a 400. And I moved the calcium reactor over. So I've never had to dose 2-part in my big tank, thank God. I would hate it. I didn't like dosing 2-part on my frag system. So I didn't mind it on my smaller tanks, but on the frag tank it was a pain in the butt, and I could never seem to dial it in properly, and that's probably one of the reasons the frag tank looks so bad. Scott Morrison says, is Aptasia X or the Aptasia Wand, which is the best? Well, the Aptasia Wand is going to work where you can get it into the tank and reach the Aptasia in question. But Aptasia X, you can pretty much get any spot in the tank as long as you can get your hand in that spot. So I think there's more flexibility with the X than there is with a wand. Kevin says, would you ever consider keeping a squid? No, but I've thought about cuttlefish because they're awesome and they're tiny. And having a little tiny tank, and then that goes back to that question someone asked earlier about offering live food to the tank all the time. If you are keeping cuttles, you have to have mysids that are alive that put in the tank to feed them, or ghost shrimp is another one. And you got to have those forever. I just noticed my green screen has snuck out. We need to shrink my box. My box is too big. Let me go back to my circle. Someone said the other day, nobody puts Milev in the corner. I thought that was pretty funny. Let's see. Heather says, I have a small footprint tank, 24 by 24, and it's tall, it's 30 inches. I'm trying to squeeze in 1 pound of rock per gallon, which seems impossible. Do I build up with putty or build a mod escape, or what can I do and not worry about 1-to-1? You know, the 1-to-1 ratio, or 1 pound of rock per gallon, was a rule with live rock, which was already very heavy and dense. Now that people are using dry rock, it's so much lighter. I mean, you get so much more rock per pound that the ratio doesn't work. I'd actually have to play with the math and find out what the difference is. You know, like take equal looking rocks and weigh one or weigh a few, kind of get that idea, and then weigh the dry rock and find out what they are in comparison, just to kind of do it. But basically, you want to create a structure in your tank that looks appealing to the eye, that looks completely natural, which is hard but not impossible. And I really recommend that the rock work not go up higher than halfway in the tank. So you said your tank is 30 inches tall. I would try to keep my rock work up to 15 inches and stop. That way you can put things on top of the 15 inches of rock and it has room to grow up. And if you have any fish that are swimming in the open area of the tank, which is dithering, they would have room to swim because it's wide open from now until the corals start growing in. If you put your rock all the way up to the top, there's a couple things that happen. Number one, you have nowhere to plant corals because the rock goes too high. And secondarily, fish tend to think if they're near the rock, they're safe. And if the rock goes all the way up to the surface of the tank, if they want to dart or elude, being chased by another fish, for example, or they get spooked for some reason by a reflection or a shadow or whatever, they could jump right out of the tank because they think there's still rock work to go. By keeping the rock down low in the tank, if a fish wants to go anywhere for cover, it ducks into the rock work. So having the rock down low gives them a reason to go away from the surface and not jump out of your tank. So that'd be my recommendation. You can use putty to hold the rock together and get your aquascape to be kind of stable so it doesn't shift on you. But I wouldn't aim for 1-to-1 because, like I said, you're probably using dry rock. Adam says, I have an old ATEC ETSS protein skimmer. I remember the ETSS skimmers. They used a really big pump to have a lot of flow. You had to have a pump with a lot of head pressure to create that foam. I would say that while you own it and you could use it, the electricity consumption may not justify owning it. You might be better off using a more modern skimmer because they use far less power, which, the skimmer's on 24 hours a day, so it's costing you every minute it's on. And if you can, like for example, my giant skimmer under my tank, and it's big compared to most people's skimmers, I think it uses something like 85 watts, where your skimmer might need 300 watts of pump, for example. I'm just grabbing arbitrary numbers, but it could be a lot of watts. It could be like a Mag 18 or something is feeding that, and that pulls a lot of juice. Dan says, do you think that the anemone cube can be replicated with a 13-gallon all-in-one? Yeah, possibly. I think so. I mean, I chose 60 for a reason. I wanted the space, but I don't see why you couldn't. I know I said someone earlier shouldn't put one in a 10-gallon, so 13 is not much larger. But I also am thinking, too, that a lot of anemones that are sold these days are very small. We used to sell anemones that are like this big around. They were this tall. You got an anemone, and you came home with it. And then I go to all these events and people are selling stuff that's like the size of a quarter, the size of a cookie, you know. It's just so tiny. I'm like, where are the anemones? What are these tiny things, and how the heck do you make such small ones, you know? So yeah, I guess it's possible, but I'm not a huge fan of them in small tanks because, like I said, they do grow and become larger. But you said that's all you wanted, was an anemone tank with a couple of clowns. So yeah, you can kind of do it. You may discover over time you're gonna have to upgrade. But I do think potentially it is. So I almost feel like I'm telling one guy no and telling the next guy yes. And that's kind of unfair. So I'm just trying to use reason that it could work, but you'll probably need to upgrade later to something a little bit bigger. Let's see. Waterbox, thank you, thank you. I said Glassbox, I knew that sounded weird. Yeah, Waterbox is another popular brand. I even talked to Waterbox about possibly replacing my cube with a new one, and I just didn't pull the trigger. Ishlicht says, any word on shows that they think are going to happen in the future? The only show that I've heard that has not been canceled is Machina, and I'm really surprised because it's in August, which is only a couple of months away. So will they change their mind suddenly and say, we're not doing it? I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know if the vendors are going to show up. I don't know if the hobbyists are going to show up. It's, everything's so up in the air. Crisis Film says, so the anemone tank parameters are right on reef specs, but the anemones are shriveling up. The tentacles just pull in, and they get so small. I'm running the ACAN lighting, the LED 600 PA 18B. I don't know that light fixture specifically. But perhaps you're running your lights too long at a too great an intensity for these anemones to be shriveled down like that. That would be my first guess, because you said everything else is on track. While they're shriveled down, is it around the clock, or is it shriveled down in the evening, shriveled down in the morning? You know, they are kind of moody. And there are certain parts of the day where they probably look great. And, you know, now that we're stuck at home all the time, you have the opportunity to see them all day long and all night long. You can check on the middle of the night and see what they're doing and see if there's anything that gives you a clue what's happening. But my guess, maybe it's a lighting thing that's just really annoying them at the moment. Philly says you should record feeding time and run it as your background sometime. The feeding time is actually in these videos. I think both videos have me feeding tanks at different times. So it does happen. It's just like but you see, it's like 2 minutes. So I'd have to loop me putting food in the tank over and over, and then you're going to start thinking I feed this tank all the time, which I don't. Glenn Smith says, what's the best coral food additive or liquid supplements you have found that work well for giving SPS a really colorful pop? That's kind of arbitrary, but I really like Benarif because when you use that food, and I sell it in the shop, that one doesn't add to your nitrate or phosphate problems. It doesn't grow cyano in your tank, you know, so it's a real nice perk. It's a microfood that has bacteria in it, so it's beneficial to the tank. And the problem is I keep forgetting to use it. I am so used to just thawing some food and putting it in the tank within 5 minutes. And I forget until someone posts, I just use Benarif. I'm like, oh yeah, and I mix up a cup. And I think I do it like every 2 weeks. And I want to do it twice a week. I need to like put a reminder on my phone, or I need to, I don't know what, stick it on the kitchen counter where it's in plain sight. But I want to start using it more. When I was talking with Dwayne recently, he lost a couple of corals, and you know, he was solving some issues with the system, and he told me he got a large, huge jar of Benarif, and he was using it every single day on his tank. And it, of course, his corals started growing like crazy. And he said he was feeling guilty because he was using it up too fast because it was so much. And he felt like he was being greedy with it, you know? And I'm like, oh yeah, thanks for reminding me, I need to do it. But no, I really do think that's a good one, and it doesn't do anything weird, doesn't make your skimmer overflow, and it doesn't have weird side effects, so that's why I like that one. Crisis Films, is your anemone cube and the big display tank connected together, or are they separate? Steve Mins says, what are the tiny specks that are all over my skimmer? The sump sides, they're inside the skimmer, they're very hard. That is probably spirorbid worms, which are these little tiny filter feeders. And if you go to my Critter ID section and look under worms, I think you'll find it there. They're very small. And I took a macro lens and I really zoomed in, and they're like these beautiful geometric shaped with feather dusters that come out that are, some are red, and they're really cool looking. They scrape right off with a credit card, and they're completely normal, and they do happen. And if you clean your skimmer in citric acid once a year, it'll get rid of all that. I've had other tube worms grow on there. There were a different type of thing that grew long. It made my whole thing look like a cactus, and I scrubbed it all clean. People were like, how did you let that get that bad? And I was like, no, they were really prolific this year. And I just kind of watched it. It was kind of fun to watch, but then when it's time to clean, it sucked. Martin says, hi from the Czech Republic. Can I ask how to add safely a copper band to the tank? The NIA mature tank and other fish have to be established. The best way to add a copper band, okay, so let's say you buy one. I do recommend that when you're buying the copper band, if you're there in person, that you ask the store owner to feed that fish in front of you and make sure it's eating. And if it's eating, buy that fish and buy the food they just gave it. So you can do that at your house. And then what I did in my own tank, which worked successfully for me, was I hung the Peacemaker, which is this acrylic box that I mount in the top of my tank, and it's got a bunch of holes. And I put the copper band in there for 3 days where the whole reef could see it, but no one could touch it. And I put food inside that box several times a day so it wouldn't starve. And then I also put food in that box right when I fed the reef. And that way I was assuring that there was going to be adequate food for the copper band so it wouldn't go into my reef starving to death. And then after 3 days, I poured it into the tank and there was no aggression. So I'm a huge proponent of using the Peacemaker. And that is just a product that I came up with years ago that I sell. And you can make something out of egg crate yourself, or you might find some kind of acclimate box you can mount inside your tank, but it needs to have a lot of holes in it so that water can flow through it so the fish doesn't die of asphyxia, a lack of air. Because if it's just in a square box of water in the tank with no movement, it's going to suffer from oxygen deprivation. Now you could put an air stone in there, but again, it's just better to have holes in the box and let the tank flow through it so it's all the same water all the time. But like I said, feed that fish a lot initially to make sure it's not getting too thin. And then hopefully, once it's in your tank, it'll do well. But listen, copper bands are really hit or miss. There's no guarantee that the one you buy is going to live. I have bought several over the last 20 years of being in this hobby, and I had a couple that were winners, that I had for a long, long time. One I had for 5 years, another one I've had now for almost a year. But there were several that didn't make it a week. It just, I don't know why that they don't do well, but it's no guarantee. And I had lost a few of them trying over and over and over that I felt guilty, and I stopped buying them for a while. I just said, okay, I'm not going to do it. Forget it. And then, it was, I guess, a year ago when I said, okay, let me try one more time, And this time I hit gold. It worked out. Reefing with O says, I have a 10-gallon anemone cube plumbed into the main system. I keep the main one and usually trade the babies. That's perfect. See, with that being shared with another big body of water, you can have more success. So I agree with that completely. Absolutely, I'm glad it helped. So if it is live rock, you can... We have such good gear, you're not dependent on the 1-to-1 ratio. You can still use less. I wouldn't recommend minimalistic. I find that's too little. I feel like if you have so little rock, like let's say you use a lot of branches and it looks like spider legs in the tank and that's all there is, I think that's a negative because there's not enough surface area to plant things like corals, and there's no places that a fish could call home, a little spot that's safe and secluded and defensible because it's open all around them. It's like trying to imagine giant chopsticks and you made like a teepee of chopsticks, right? And everyone in your area lives inside this teepee, but there's no privacy. You can see through the bars and they can see through into you, and there's no walls in between. So that's why I'm saying too much minimalist is also a problem. So I would try to aim for enough rock to create some nooks and crannies, create a nice structure, something that's interesting to look at, but not overwhelming the tank with too much rock. Kristen says, what do you think of a hybrid T5 Lite for a 125-gallon mixed reef tank? I'm thinking about getting the aquatic life. Yeah. No, actually, last week's live stream was all talking about hybrid lights, and yeah, they're good. They help remove some of the shadows that we so often encounter with LED lit tanks these days, and the T5s flood in all those areas that are lacking. So yeah, that's not a bad idea at all. You'll probably, the light you're looking at is like an all-in-one unit that you add, all the pieces together and raise it to the right height. Should be really nice. Tyler says, do you know how much water, ATO water, you go through? I'm trying to get a rough idea of the size reservoir to get. My tank evaporates 3.6 gallons a day. Spencer says, what are your thoughts on using a recirculating CO2 scrubber on a protein skimmer monitored by an Apex for pH control? I think you should watch the BRS video on this very topic because they've done it and I have not. I have no opinion. I've never used a CO2 scrubber. Okay, Crisis Films updated us on these anemones. So he says they open up in the dark, and then they start shriveling up shortly after the lights have been on for a couple of hours. I'm trying not to run the percentages on the settings being too high. I think that they're not liking your lights. That's my gut. So I would suggest you run your lights something way shorter, like let's say 4 hours a day instead of 8 or 12 or whatever it is you're picked. Just run them for a little while, give them a burst of energy each day, and then just leave them off. And then gradually add an extra half hour to the lighting schedule each week until you get all the way back up to your normal schedule. And maybe that will overcome the problem you're having with these anemones. Kevin says, what do you think about the show on TV, mostly fake reef fish only for celebrities? Okay, I think I know what you're saying. You're asking about Tanked and the reef tanks that have all the fake corals and they have some fish. I actually enjoyed watching that show a lot because I love drama and I love TV. So it didn't bother me. And I myself don't want a tank with a fake insert. That's me. I like to grow corals. I like to know that everything in my tank is real. But like right here, you're looking at everything. That might look fake to someone that doesn't know the difference, but because it's so glowy. But all that stuff you're looking at grew from nothing, from little tiny twigs. And I really do enjoy that. I don't have the desire to have a fish-only system. I've never kept a fish-only tank. But if I were to get some really expensive fish, like a conspiculatus, which is this gorgeous fish that I think sells for like $5,000, I would probably have to put it in a fish-only tank. And maybe in that tank, just to avert boredom for myself, I'd put a coral insert in there just so it looks better, because that fish will eat corals, and so I can't actually put corals in with it. So there is that, but for me, I prefer real, Cordell says, what do you do about high nitrate and zero phosphate? A huge water change will bring the high nitrate down. And you didn't say how high, you just said high. So high could be 20, high could be 100. I don't know what high is for you. And then the zero phosphate is a little too low. You need a little bit more phosphate in your tank, and you might actually have to dose it to get it to come up. B-Speak says, do you have any Montipora digitata? I have in the past. I don't have anything right now. They're super brittle. They break so easily. I mean, they're beautiful. They grow these fingers. It's really cool. They come in lots of colors. And I used to collect all kinds of digitata that I get my hands on. I had like 5 different kinds. And they're all in my Critter ID section, in the SPS section, so you can look at the different styles. I really like them. Angelfish like to nip on them. So if you have any kind of flame angel or coral beauty, they may destroy it. There's a chance of that. But they're not fast growing to where they become a problem. I never was like, oh my God, I have too much digitata. That never happened. It's really pretty, and it's really nice. You can mix them up and have a red one next to a German blue polyp, next to an orange one. Very fun to have. I really like those. Kurt says, did you ever find a taker for your old Peacemaker? Yes, Eric is one of our moderators in the group. He's up in Canada, and I tailored it and cut it down and rounded the edges, made it as modern as I could. And so he actually has the original prototype that he uses in his tank to this day. So it's kind of cool that it lives on in another system. Edwin says, do you still use Safety Stop? Actually, I do, whenever I get a fish. But since I rarely get a fish, I don't have to do it very often. But if I come home with any kind of fish, I definitely put it through safety stop. Spencer says, have you heard of people using Texas Holy Rock in place of traditional dry rock like Reef Saver? Yeah, well, I mean, people do all kinds of stuff, but I don't recommend it. I don't actually use anything from a quarry. I've just always chosen to stick with stuff from preferably live rock. I've used some rock from Marco Rock because I came home with it from a trade show. I thought it was interesting, so I grabbed a few pieces. And then I got some rock from this guy that is in my frag system, and that frag system does so badly that I swear it's bad rock. So I'm going to, when I do the reset, I'll probably remove most of that rock, just because I don't know what's going on with it. So that's about it. All right, so that's the end of our stream. We've covered a lot. You got to do a little interview. I really appreciate you guys tuning in today. And like I said earlier, I hope you stay safe. Today is Water Test Saturday, so pull out your test kits. Clean your protein skimmers, clean the neck of your skimmer. By the way, I have a friend in New York who said that the weather there today is 20 degrees. I knew a huge cold front was coming through, so if you are in that general area, please make sure that your heaters are still operational. You didn't do anything crazy like unplug them for the summer so that your tank will stay properly warm for the next few days until this cold front passes. If you're in an area where there's a possibility the power will go out, I hope you have battery backups or a generator or something to keep your tank safe. For the rest of us, like here in Texas, it is 74 degrees and beautiful outside, so we don't have to sweat it. I'm sure there's people in Arizona that are sweating. It's probably 90 degrees for them, or 95. So, wherever you are, I just hope that, you're staying on top of what's going on with the weather outside, the COVID outside, your house is safe, your tank is clean, your livestock is thriving, and that the stream helped you just a little bit. And if you have any other questions, you can always reach me over on Club Miller's Reef on Facebook, or you can send me an email at sales@mielersreef.com. Guys, I hope you have a great weekend, and I will see you guys next Saturday. Bye!